Welcome to the Plug Ugly Podcast. So today we've got an awesome guest and some great stories and some amazing information to learn. So before we get started, I'm going to we're going to go through some ads. These guys really help us keep going. They really support us. They pay for the software um, and a lot of different things that go into making a podcast. So go ahead and show them your attention. Let's go jump into Jump Medic. And I've got an ad this time.
Jump Medic is owned and operated by a working paramedic with over a decade of EMS experience. Jump Medic first aid kits have been designed to be user friendly, with useful supplies, and their easily accessible flat lay design. Their most popular kit is the Jump Medic Pro Gen 2, but they have anything you need from their smaller hard shell kit to their Jump Medic Elite. If you want something specific, then check out their Build-A-Bag page, where you can custom build a first aid kit and have it packed and shipped to your door. Jump Medic is the only company that lets you customize your first aid kit, and keep in mind shipping is always free throughout the U.S. Check out jumpmedic.com and their Instagram page at jumpmedicusa. Jump
Awesome. Jump Medic's got some awesome supplies, awesome bags, awesome stuff to look at. Go check them out. And if you decide that's something you're into and something you need, go ahead and get you some cool jump bags and use code Plug Ugly for a good percentage off. Another one is Salty Axes Apparel. Salty Axes Apparel has stickers, t-shirts, hats, some awesome stuff. They're coming out with some new stuff. I just talked to their owner just recently, and they've got some new stuff coming out. Go check them out. If you've already looked at them, look at them again. Go find something that you might like. And also, we have an awesome sponsor, Jump Bag EMT, who does a lot of different things, a lot of really cool things for the EMT community as a whole. And we're actually going to have him on today, so we'll let him talk about it later on. But that's going to be our guest. So let's get Austin in here real quick. Austin,
What's happening?
how you doing, buddy?
Good.
Good. Um, so Austin and I have been talking to Dan Bryant is going to be our guest today, and really cool dude. It's a lot of cool experiences. He's not a volunteer in the common sense of volunteering at your local volunteer house, but he has volunteered his life. He's volunteered his time and his family's time to the fire service as a whole and to the EMS community. He is a federal firefighter that works for the Army. He's a civilian, and he is also a reservist for the Air Force. So let's give him some attention. Let's go ahead and see what we can learn from him. He's got some awesome experiences, some awesome stories, and I'm excited. You ready?
Yep.
Awesome. Dan, welcome in.
How's it? Thanks for
Hey,
having me.
sorry, your mic was muted.
Oh, yeah. Hey, how's it? Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here. Sorry, we had a little technical issue at the beginning. I couldn't get it to stream to YouTube.
No.
It just wasn't giving me the option for some reason. So we redid it. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Dan Bryant, and I want to be a firefighter since I was in high school. I got to do a little volunteer through my high school program and saw a car fire, and that was it for me. Fuel just dumping out the bottom. It was on fire. I'm like, this is awesome. So I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a Marine, and the two could line up awesome. But I knew I could pursue the fire service after the Marine Corps. So I joined the Marines, and the Marines don't typically give you what you want. So I loaded bombs on Harriers for 4 years. I met my wife. She was also a bomb loader in the Marines, and we got married, and then I started pursuing fire. And since then, I've worked for the Air Force Reserve. I've worked for the Air Force. I've worked for the Navy. I've worked for the Army. I've worked on Marine Corps bases. I've kind of been all over the place. I'm still in the Air Force Reserve. I'm getting ready to retire, but I've still got a few more years left in my traditional career field and working for the Army right now in Alabama. I got a wife and 2 kids. We live in Dothan, and we run Jump Bag EMT, which is an education platform basically for EMS, helping people with national registry and also just comprehension so they can get to people's living rooms and be ready.
Cool. That's awesome. So lifetime of fire. How long have you been in the service completely? Like what age did you start, and how long has it been since then?
Well, if you want to count, when I was in high school, I was like 17 or 18 years old,
Okay.
and it was called a sites program, where 2 days a week you went to a location for like the first 3 hours of school, and the other 3 days you went to regular school. So I did the fire department for almost probably 3/4 of the year, and it was pretty awesome. They At one point they had me doing like reports for different fires, and I kept seeing my buddy's address after address after address because we had bonfires all the time, and they got pretty
Mhm.
wild. And they were like, "This is you?" Yeah. They're like, "All right, we're gonna quit worrying about it then." And so that was kind of wild. That was like getting into the administrative side of fire. But then the Marine Corps was like a 4-year hiatus. Uh, but then in 2006, 2007, I joined the Air Force Reserves. They sent me through the Fire Academy. I did 1 year on active duty orders on Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. And then after those orders were up, they hired me as a civilian. And I've been doing it ever since. So really 2007 till now has been pretty full time, and sometimes full time with part time.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of wearing a lot of different hats.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things that comes with wearing different hats and being in the military, and being a federal firefighter is you've gotten to be in a lot of different areas. You've had the opportunity to transfer to different places and work in some unique areas. Um, some of which are Hawaii, right? You started in Hawaii at Hickam.
Yeah, so that was pretty awesome because to get in the reserves, typically people are trying to get in the reserves, and like you just go in the reserves, no big deal. Well, we were getting out of the Marine Corps, and we are using the military move to go to Hawaii because my wife's family was there. So we were going to go live with them for a little bit and get started. Well, I had to interview with the fire chief to get into the Air Force Reserves, which was very atypical. And typically they only had 1 or 2 spots available a year. This particular moment, there happened to be 3 or 4. So I got in, they accepted me. And then like everybody was pretty much local. And then I was just, like a haole, like a white boy that was just in Hawaii. And so I didn't really know anybody. And that part was kind of hard because I wasn't local, but I also wasn't active duty. So I didn't get really adopted by either side for a while.
Yeah.
So for the first 6 months working at Hickam, I was pretty lonely, trying to figure out what that is. I had a wife I was trying to support. Hawaii was crazy expensive. And then one day, one of the senior captains was like, "Hey, you play basketball?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can hold my own." He's like, "You think so?" I said, "Yeah." And then that was it. I was adopted. And then it was the most amazing department. You can't do anything in Hawaii by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, you were
Anything.
telling me that it's very family based and like everybody has to help everybody.
All the time. If you walk by with a chamois, 4 people are going to follow you out to the bay, and you were like, "Oh, I was just putting this in my locker," and they're like, "Oh, okay." Like you couldn't do anything by yourself. You couldn't eat by yourself. You couldn't work out by yourself. You couldn't do anything by yourself. But it was just it was so family oriented. And I had 2 captains in particular who just, I didn't realize the seeds they were planting in me because I didn't even know I was a garden. Like I didn't even know I could grow. I was just
Yep.
young and dumb, and they were so foundational. Jerome Liu and Sammy Ferreira, they like poured themselves into me day after day after day. And to this day, I do a lot of the stuff based off them because it's muscle memory. It's the foundation that they laid. But once they adopted me, man, it was just training, eating. They taught me how to be a man. They taught me how to be a firefighter. It was just a completely different animal. And then when my orders were up after a year, they said, "Dan, we like you. We're going to hire you." So they flew a position to get on with Hickam, and they hired me. It took about, I don't know, maybe 6 months before that position came up. So I was kind of working some odd jobs and still doing the reserve thing.
Sure.
But I was so grateful to get in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what was different about fighting fire from the military side versus the civilian side? Was there any difference? How
Well,
did
Hickam,
that integrate? I guess is my question.
yeah. So that part was interesting because on Hickam, it was like almost half military and half civilian. And they
Okay.
were both at Hickam. So you had those old heads and those the locals that had been there forever. They were in for 20 years, and they were like salty captains. And then you had guys and gals that were 4 or 5 years into their military career, and so they're crew chiefs. So those are the same positions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But those aren't the same experiences and people. And so when you're doing, as you guys know, as you're doing a career job, I mean, you don't have to be done at 20 years in the fire department. You don't have to be done at 40 years. Like it can go extensively. In the military, you've got about 20 years.
Mhm.
So everything is in, by the time you hit about your 8th or 9th year, you're kind of going to the admin side. You're kind of off the floor. So everything is super expedited. So you had a lot of young men and women that were crewing and trying to keep up with like 15, 20-year vets.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the Hawaiian culture, they were so just welcoming. They invested in all these young guys. They poured themselves into them. Then they would leave, and then the next people would come in, and they would start all over. So it was this habitual training calendar, always investing in the new people, because there was always new people coming in needing to learn how to drive the crash truck or learn a pumper or mobile water supply, learning the airfield, because at Hickam you shared Honolulu International Airport with the Air Force Base. So you were responding to commercial airlines and 747s with, civilians coming and going.
Sure.
So it was really unique. But they just work hard, they eat well, and I mean, it was
Yeah.
just amazing culture overall.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. You're talking about constantly being in a training mindset, with new guys coming in and having to keep them up to speed. What kind of things were unique to Hawaii? I mean, you're talking about an island. It's not mainland USA. I'm sure water supply is a little different. I'm sure the call volume is a little different. What kind of things, um, in Hawaii did you not have to worry about outside of Hawaii, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, like in Hawaii, obviously you don't got to worry about freezing.
Yep.
So, like above ground or underground hydrants, dry stem, wet stem, that wasn't a thing. You weren't going to be draining your pump, during winter months or whatever. That just wasn't going to happen. But it was very humid there, and so the trucks could get beat up pretty good. I mean, it's Hawaii, it's not like Florida, but the trucks
Sure.
could get beat up. The salt air, the salt water, if you had to do some drafting or anything like that, you could really eat up your pumps. But for the most part, Air Force had a huge budget, so we just had a ton of equipment. But some of the unique attributes was Hickam and Pearl Harbor. They were right next to each other. They shared a fence. They were almost the same base, but the Air Force spends money different than the Navy. So it was like a line in the sand. You're on the other side of the railroad tracks. You went over to the Navy. So knowing what tools and resources were on the other side was important, because they were also fed fire, but all of Hawaii was fed fire Hawaii under the Navy, and then Hickam was just the Air Force.
Gotcha.
So we were a standalone Air Force entity surrounded by Navy. So it was like fed fire and then Hickam. They were two different animals, even though it was federal. So that was unique. So we had different masks, we had different air packs. All that was different. The other thing, just terminology. You didn't do east-west. It was leeward and windward.
Everything was naval based.
Well, just why? Because they said leeward side, the windward side. It wasn't even like normal terminology. It was just Hawaiian terminology.
Gotcha.
And so some of that was different. I'm trying to think what else was unique there. We did have brush fires. I almost lost a brush truck.
Gotcha.
It wasn't even a brush truck. It was mobile water supply. It was like a 10,000 gallon flight line
tanker
water tender.
Yeah.
It was not meant to be in the woods. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I almost burned up.
That's funny.
How do you burn a truck with 10,000 gallons of water in it? Yeah.
A lot of fire.
That was interesting. We had aircraft from all over the world coming all the time, whether it be helicopters or fighters or commercial aircraft or spy aircraft. They were coming from all over. Then we had all the commercial jets where people were coming into Hawaii to visit and vacation. So that was unique. We had a water rescue program, which was really more of a water recovery program. By the time you loaded up the jet ski and you went out to try to get to somebody. So that was unique. But we had the flight line, all the different types of aircraft. We did structural firefighting, hazmat, high angle, low angle, water rescue, extrication. Pretty much everything was in one station, and you did everything, and then had to maintain all the equipment for that.
No, I know your expertise is in the EMS side of things now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the EMS program like there? Did you guys run an EMS program? Did you guys run medic units, or did an outside agency run it?
Yeah, so There, and I didn't realize how abnormal it was. Not everybody was an EMT for the Air Force side, but they would send some people to get EMT. But then we also had a few paramedics, and we even had a couple of advanced. So we had an ambulance, but the medics did the ambulance, and so they would do some medevacs and take people out. But I was just very like, oh, fire, 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 and didn't really pay attention to much on the MS side because we were well-fed cats. You know, we had some pretty experienced medics that ran all the medic calls. And a lot of time they were on the rescue truck. So an ambulance and the rescue truck would go. And so the pumper wasn't going to go, and anybody on a crash truck was tied to the flight line. So they weren't going to go. Yeah. So you didn't get a whole lot of reps. So I didn't really realize how lousy of an EMT I was, but we did regular training. Like I said, you couldn't do anything by yourself. So, and there was always a training culture. So you might walk into the day room and there was a dummy laying in between the recliners. And they're like, what are you going to do? I'm like, you want me to put it away? They're like, no, that's a person. I'm like, oh, now you're on the spot and you got to function. So they were always training, but I was just too young and dumb to realize what they were doing.
Sure.
But the medics, they were talented. They were full blown fire medics, rappelling out of buildings when we were doing training and doing patient care. They were just incredibly well rounded.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So you went from, you were in Hawaii for 4 years, right?
Yeah, we were there for about 4 or 5 years, and my in-laws moved, and so then we were trying to decide what we wanted to do. And I actually quit the fire department. I thought I was going to do something else career-wise, and then I don't know, in less than a year, every time a fire truck drove by and you're checking it out and you're looking at the lay, it was like I'm not really getting paid well, and I'm kind of employable. So I started trying to get back into the fire department, and we moved to Washington State, where I was in the Air Force Reserves there at Spokane, Washington at Fairchild. And then it was kind of a dry season for about 6 months. Then I got offered a job at Plant 42 in Palmdale, California. And so we moved down there. And this was actually my only taste of volunteer is when we were in Washington. I joined Medical Lake Fire Department, which was volunteer. Okay. I was part of them for like 4 months. And I want to say a week after I got sworn in, we moved and I gave them their gear back. I never went on a call. I just did training with them for like 3 months.
That's funny.
I had a beeper for like 4 days.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's cool. Then we went to Palmdale.
Sweet. All right, let's talk about Palmdale. So Palmdale was with the Air Force or with the Army?
It was the Air Force, and so Air Force Plant 42 is an Air Force plant, so it's not a base. And so, like, let's say the government wants you to build rockets. Well, you can't do that in your garage, right? So you rent space from the government, and then they give you a contract to build crazy things.
Yeah.
And so now you're on an Air Force plant. So Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, NASA, they were all the tenants. They were on this base. Skunk Works was there for a while. So if it was crazy at some point in our nation's history, it probably has come through Plant 42. Gotcha. And there wasn't any assigned aircraft, but it was a flight line in the middle of the desert with NASA. Okay. And so they all had their own little area with their own fire response team and like flyaway gates. So they had access to the flight line. And then there was like 3 federal buildings, and we had 2 stations, and we were there to support the flight line and these facilities if something happened. But there was like 3 buildings we were allowed to go into. Everything else you went inside, you were gonna have to sign something. And there was no assigned aircraft, so you'd see some stuff sometimes, but that was pretty wild. Sure. But you want to talk about low call volume?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like,
what were you running?
Confused. You're like, what is that? You know?
So like, what kind of calls were you running? Like, if you did run a call, what were you going to? Just like standbys for an aircraft with an engine out or something?
Yeah. So they would do like hot defuels, or green starts, they call them, right after an engine was modified or fabricated. So basically shoots like a giant flame out of the rear end of it where it burns everything off. And so you got to be there to make sure that goes out and doesn't start anything on fire behind it. The hot defuels and refuels, because they're always testing new aircraft and testing different systems. So stuff could go wrong. So you'd go on a lot of those and a lot of aircraft standbys. And then, we would have the weather issues, or somebody would get injured inside of one of these facilities. You'd have to go inside and run the medical, and they typically had their own nursing stations. So our call volume was pretty benign. It was mostly in-flight emergencies, smell of smoke or hydraulic failure, that kind of stuff. Smell of gas smell of gas in the cockpit, or some sort of an alarm going off in one of the structures. But I mean, there really wasn't a ton of calls. It was mostly in-flight emergencies.
Yep.
So how does that work with, like, if something classified's on a plane and, they call you off for emergency, are you allowed to be like, what's on it? How does that work?
So sometimes you get some heads up on things that are going on, and then you also just recognize that you're not going to know. And I mean, half of this stuff, we always think about, what are you going to see? You have no idea. I mean, if you walk by a dry erase board and there's a formula up there, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, unless you're a chemist or I don't know, an engineer, it probably doesn't mean anything. So you might see something you don't even know. But when you see certain aircraft, we would get some FAMs on some aircraft, and then, sometimes there would have to be like an NDA or something of that nature. But I mean, you wouldn't really even know how to explain it to somebody, because, we're not aircraft engineers.
Yeah.
We throw water at it when it's on fire and recognize it's going to burn for days no matter what we do. So you typically didn't know if you were looking at something crazy unless you'd already heard the rumors, of
Sure.
Yeah.
or you saw the silhouette in the sky and you're thinking that's not normal. Yeah. Let's hope that doesn't
You just
crash.
hope it doesn't crash. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Cool. So, let's see. Palmdale. How was the training atmosphere at Palmdale? I mean, you guys didn't run a lot of calls. What did you do with your downtime?
So we did have a lot of downtime, but we had a really strong deputy chief. His name was Art Harcum, and I had actually worked with him in Hawaii. So I went to Japan for an exercise with the Air Force. He was the fire chief out there, and he was good friends with the person that was running this, basically a chemical warfare training. Like, you're in a chemical environment, and so now you're firefighting. How do you do that? And you're wearing the mop gear and all this stuff with firefighting. And I just happened to do really well there, and so I got coined. And so then I knew Art because he was working dispatch. He had retired from the Air Force after that. So when I applied for Plant 42, he happened to be the deputy chief, and he knew of me from Hickam. And then he contacted his buddy from Japan, and they vouched for me, so he hired me, which got me back into the career field. But he was awesome. He would bust your chops. Like, you had to be ready because Art was coming. And so he would walk in and he would, run his hand over the truck. And if it was dirty, you were going to get lit up. But if it's 10:15 on a Tuesday and he comes in and he starts giving you a hard time, but the training for the week is done, the station details are done, and the vehicles are clean and checked out, he's going to bust your chops and sit down and eat lunch with you, and you're done for the day.
Yeah.
He wasn't really into busy work, but he did maintain discipline, and that the benchmarks had to be met. And if they weren't, he was going to be all over you.
Yeah.
So we had a strong training calendar and things that we simply had to do. And so that was good too, because it kept us busy for not being busy.
So Palmdale is when you went through paramedic school, right?
Yes. And that's where I got to give them some more love, because they didn't have an ALS mission. And so when I said I wanted to go to paramedic school, it was pretty much a death sentence for my time there.
Sure.
But they supported it. And so class was on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we worked 48 on, 72 off. So we'd work 2, off 2, work 2, off 2, and then work 2, and then off 3. And that was our 2-week period. And so week 1 and week 2, they were the same over and over and over. So you knew what your schedule was marching forward per pay period. So I just traded with people so I could be off every Tuesday and Friday. I changed stations so I could have my Kelly day on, I think, Tuesday. And then I just traded with people to always be off on Friday. And then they did the sequestration where they were cutting hours for all federal employees. And so they cut our hours. We lost like 11 or 12 hours a pay period, which made no sense because we didn't have any military on our base. So the operational tempo wasn't slowing down. Like, Northrop had a quota. they were going to be building stuff. Like they had to get it done. Their operational tempo wasn't going to change. So we couldn't really do with less people.
Yeah.
But the government's the government. So I cashed in, man. I took all those days where I wasn't allowed to come to work and I went to medic school. So I saved all that vacation time and all that trade time to get through. And then once internship started, my wife was pregnant and we were coming very close to having my boy Samson. But I traded with people. So I would work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 72 straight. I would come home Wednesday and hang out with my wife. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I just did 3 12-hour shifts on the ambulance. And my internship was about an hour and 15 minutes away. So, I mean, I would work 72 hours straight, be off for a day, and then I would pull 3 15-hour days.
Yeah.
And then started over. And so did that for like 3 months.
So did you didn't have any housing on the plant, right?
No,
it's just an airstrip and a couple of buildings, right?
That's it. There was no like grocery store or base gym.
Yeah.
There was just some like ground owls and coyotes.
Yeah. You guys lived off base in Palmdale, like in the town, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
And Palmdale was a little rough from the east side to the west side. It was so windy.
Yeah.
I mean, incredibly windy. It would blow your grill like through your backyard. Trampoline. You'd have a trampoline in your backyard one day, the next day it would be gone. You don't even know where it came from. It was so windy. It was pretty crazy. I could see why they want an airstrip there because plenty of lift.
Yeah. Plenty of lift. That makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So Palmdale. And then from Palmdale, you went to San Diego. We're going to harp on San Diego for a few minutes because you had a lot of time and a lot of experiences in San Diego, right?
Yeah. So we're in Palmdale. I got my medic license, and then we were trying to get down to San Diego. My wife had some family in the area who were just very, very healthy, quality people. So we wanted to get down there with them. And my father-in-law grew up in San Diego. So there was those roots. So I was trying to get in, like hundreds of people apply for San Diego. So it's very competitive. So, and I didn't know anybody. So I called over to the department and I talked to like a receptionist or somebody, and I asked to speak to one of the chiefs, and they asked what it was about. And I said, human resources. And so they sent my information over. And so the chief called me and he's like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, I'm Dan Bryant. I'm a firefighter. I want to come work for you. He's like, I thought this was about human resources. I'm like, yeah, hiring. Can I send you my resume? And so, so he happened to be a battalion chief, and at the station he was at, which was Balboa, was an army hospital. He worked with 2 guys that I worked with in Hawaii. So he asked about me, and they vouched for me. And then another guy that I was good friends with at Plant 42, he was the best friend of the chief I called. But I had no idea because the guy at Plant 42 wasn't telling everybody, oh, by the way, my best friend is a fire chief in San Diego, because then resources, sure. Right? So he called up to Plant 42, talked to my buddy, and he was like, oh, yeah, he's awesome. So they hired me. I ended up not getting the job at first. They hired somebody else because he was a crew chief and I was a tailboard firefighter at the time. And like 2-3 months after that, I didn't even know I was still in the thing. They called and they said, hey, we need you to start in about 3 weeks. And they did a direct hire. And I came over and started in San Diego. I had my medic license, but there wasn't a medic position available yet. So I came in tailboard working at the hospital, which was neat. Awesome place to work. And then about 6 months after that, a medic spot opened up and I was able to get it.
Cool. So you were at a hospital? You were stationed at a hospital or what? Yeah,
Naval Medical Center, San Diego, Balboa. It's a major hospital for San Diego and for the military. A lot of wounded warriors. It's a major hospital for the military. Yeah. So, but it's kind of a small base. And so there's one fire station there. And the way San Diego works is kind of interesting because it's Fed Fire San Diego. There's about 13 different installations. So there's like 13 different fire stations, but it's all Fed Fire San Diego. But if you're the second due engine, you might be driving through downtown San Diego to get to another base. Yeah. To be that second in engine or ALS response or whatever. But on the hospital, we would get a lot of medicals for people coming in the gate, but you were 30 seconds from the ER.
Yeah.
So
it's not a lot of patient time.
Yeah, it was almost inappropriate to do like an assessment and vital signs
Yeah.
because you're just delaying care. So we would scoop them up and then take them over to the hospital. But they had all kinds of wounded warrior programs there. They had awesome gyms. They were bringing in like Panda Express and all these different things for Wounded Warrior Night, and they had just extra food, so you go eat it. I used to take the ambulance by myself over to the base chapel to go to church, and I go to the library because everything was in like 3 or 4 minutes, so you could just meet on scene. It was just the hospital, and then the surrounding roads going around the hospital and the ones in between. That was it. We shared a parking lot with one of the gyms where they played basketball, and there were saunas and racquetball, and so I mean,
Yeah. It's like its own
You're
little
having a blast.
community right there.
yeah, we were playing sports, we were eating, we were playing tennis.
Yeah.
We were getting to train, but you could really only train on Saturdays because the base was so packed Monday through Friday. So Saturday was your target day to get out and do some stuff. You know, if you want to pull line or spray water, because there just wasn't gonna be space Monday through Friday.
Makes sense. So let's talk about like now. I want to start touching on some of the demographic stuff. So you're on a base, right? When we run calls, a lot of times here we run, when it comes to fire stuff, it's residential fire alarms. It's maybe some gas odors. Maybe it's assisting EMS with like heavy patients.
Mhm.
You get your 700 and 800, 900 pound patients that are, they request fire departments to come help lift.
That was
Um,
Hawaii.
yeah,
Yeah, we had some heavy haulers over there.
I bet. I bet Samoans can get pretty big.
Yeah.
They're big dudes. But yeah, so like what we do here, we run a lot of car wrecks, run a lot of stuff like that. We don't run what we don't run a lot of are traumas. Don't run a lot of traumas. Most everything in the civilian world on the outside of military bases is medical stuff. A
Mhm.
lot of disease, a lot of history of disease, a lot of not taking care of themselves. So one of the cool things since talking to you is when you're on a military base, you're looking at a totally different demographic. You're looking at
Yeah.
young guys and females, but you're looking at younger people that generally don't have a history of disease and illness.
Mhm.
They're generally held to some sort of a physical standard, so they're generally healthier.
Mhm.
And then younger people specifically have a lot of have that partying stage that goes through them.
Mhm.
Especially in the military, it's a thing.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the demographic on base versus the demographic outside of the base.
Well, it was depending on what base you were on in San Diego too, because there's so many special forces, and there's some very unique bases there as well. And then you had shipyards. There were straight up shipyards. So cutting fingers off in one of the hatches, falling down ladder wells, falling off the side of a ship, getting ran over by forklifts, having pallets fall on them. If you were on a shipyard, you were running a lot of traumas. There wasn't a lot of medicals. People typically weren't getting sick. And then also on the shipyards, there wasn't housing. So things would really shut down 3, 4 o'clock, and then they would go to wherever they were living with housing. So Coronado was an exception. There was major aircraft carriers there, and there was also base housing. So that was a bit of an exception. But then you had different bases that had a lot of base housing and more like computer type jobs. So you'd respond to a lot more medicals there, a lot more drunks or overdoses where people are coming to base or bringing in guests, kind of low speed motor vehicle accidents or the turned knee or turned ankle, dehydration. You'd actually run some some cardiac calls, which I always laughed because they were going to PT or whatever, but they haven't been hydrating, they haven't eaten, and they drank like 2 Red Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a cardiac emergency.
Yeah,
it's a stupid one, but it's still the same issue to the heart. It's just for a very dumb reason.
Yeah.
And so you'd get those, but typically young, healthy population with a lot of trauma, more so than anything else. And then you would get your psych patients, especially with the hospital, because you had a lot of PTSD, a lot of major traumas. I had he was my neighbor in San Diego for a while, and he came over from the Wounded Warriors program. His name was Nate, and he was neighbor Nate. And that dude owns real estate in my heart. Like, I love Nate, but he got blown up over there. He got blown up overseas, and then he had to learn to walk, talk, all that again at Balboa. Then they did a bridge program to bring him into the fire department. But that was unique to him, but the injuries and the things he sustained was not unique to Balboa. So you always had the suicidal ideations or threat of violence there in that hospital. So you'd get your fair share of psychs and a few medicals here and there, but trauma, essentially.
Yeah. Heck yeah, that's awesome. It's like, I think it's really neat when you talk about different areas specifically. And one of the things I want to highlight with this podcast as a format, as a whole thing, is I want to highlight the different areas that people are working in. And the way that you do something is different than the way I do something because of the demographic you work with, because of the kind of area you're in. If you're in a more urban setting, you do things differently than somebody. And like the guest we had last time was, he was in a very rural South Dakota town, with very small population and fewer firefighters that are scattered further away. Whereas, like here, where me and Austin live, we have a smaller area, a lot of firefighters, tight places, big buildings with lots of people. So the way we do things are different. And so that's one of the things I want to highlight. I think you're great for that because you've got a totally different demographic than what we see on a day-to-day basis. So that's neat.
San Diego too, you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a trauma center or a burn center.
Yeah.
So our scope of practice was smaller, and you get the imposter syndrome a little bit for things. And I think a healthy perspective in the fire service overall is just recognizing that we're good at the things we do, and we're aware. We have a general awareness of things that we don't do. So I didn't run a lot of ped calls. I didn't run a lot of geriatric calls, but I did run a lot of traumas. I did run a lot of like odd medicals because people aren't supposed to be sick. So what exactly is going on here?
Sure.
Right. But I come to a place like Alabama now and a big volunteer community, and they have a much larger scope of practice. So there's just a bunch of stuff that I'm not good at. So maybe I've been in the fire service longer than they have, but I'm not as talented as they are in this area. And so in the fire service as a whole, it's very easy to get imposter syndrome or compare. But you really only get good at what you do.
Yeah.
And then you're just aware.
Yeah, for sure.
You shouldn't get
another thing too, especially on the EMS side, it's like where you are. I'm talking about San Diego still, but in San Diego, you're talking about being really, really close to a lot of hospitals, a lot of opportunities to a lot of places to take your patients, which means you have less time with your patients. Whereas in rural Alabama, rural is a hard word, and in a lot of the more rural areas of like Alabama, I'm sure you've got 30-minute ETAs to the hospital.
Oh yeah,
ETAs to the hospital, which you've got, with lights. Yeah, you've got hour-long transports with patients that could be very sick or dying, which changes what you have to be able to do.
Yeah.
Whereas in San Diego, you don't have 45 minutes with this patient to watch this patient get worse or get better, but you pick them up and you take them and you drop them off and you're done. Whereas your scope of practice has to be a lot larger when you're in your skill set has to be a lot larger when you're in a more rural area. So that's something to think about too. That's cool.
Well, like humility too, because you can be really good at what you do until you don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So like hanging dopamine or an epi drip, I didn't do any of that in San Diego. I didn't do any of that in Albuquerque when I was there. But here people do it. So there's a level of humility thinking, okay, I've been doing this for a while and I was good at what I did. I don't do that anymore. Now I do something else. And so that's one of the downsides of moving is it's hard to maintain that same level because all of a sudden the needs and the scope is different.
Yeah.
So it makes it good that you're always being challenged and always have to learn, but it's also eating a lot of crow because everywhere you go, there's people that are more talented than you, but haven't been around as much. And so they might be in a lower position than you are because of certifications and experience and ability to interview and all that and being qualified for certain positions, but they're smarter and better than you.
Sure.
right? So, how do you handle that, especially in a type A career field like we have?
Mhm.
And in San Diego, they were used to transplants, like people coming and going all the time because people wanted to be in San Diego, but then they find out it's too expensive. Um, and so it wasn't abnormal to have turnover.
Mhm.
Whereas places like Alabama, people grew up here, they're from here, and their parents were part of the department. So it's just the learning in the culture is different, not better, not worse, just different. So you really got to stay humble, or you're going to be made humble, because
Sure.
there's always something new to learn. There's
Sure.
always a new way to handle it. Um, it's just wild.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. It's awesome. It's really neat to see like I know I harp on it a lot, but it's really neat to see the differences. And then again, like you're saying, um, when you don't do something regularly, you end up losing it. And
Mhm.
that's why in the fire service, and especially in EMS and fire, um, it's a learning thing. You're always learning. If you're not learning, you're not progressing.
Yeah,
If you're not learning, you're getting worse. You know,
yeah,
you've got to continue learning, um, especially in a lot of work like you're in, um, moving to different locations. Because, like you said, you go somewhere else. I think Austin just crashed. There we
I should still be good.
go. Going to different places, you got to rely on those people that have been there for a minute to teach you
yeah.
things. Um, what kind of advice would you have for somebody that is going to like a different place? Like, what did you do that helped you um, when moving to a different department, different area? What really? I'm
Hmm.
sure you've got to ask. You've got to ask for instruction at some places.
Yeah, and I can tell you what I haven't done well.
Okay.
Um, is sometimes you can get some big ideas or the way things should be because you've been a lot of places.
Hmm.
Maybe your way is better, but maybe it's not. But until you understand why things are the way they are, it might be a good idea to shut up and color for a while and then
Hmm.
figure out if it's truly a problem or not. I mean, you might identify an issue and you just feel like it has to get addressed. But if nobody cares, how much time, effort, and relationship are you going to squander trying to change something that doesn't really matter?
Dude, I like that. I like
Um,
that a lot. Shut up and color. That's
and
good.
it's hard. In San Diego, I got in with a guy, and we were doing a lot of stuff for the station, and we were making a lot of changes and things that worked really well. And then as things go, people leave, people come, and things got a little topsy turvy. And I was getting frustrated because certain things weren't getting maintained and yada yada yada. And I'm like, you know what? I just got to back off. And then after a little while, I was like, you know what? Turns out there was like 10 things that were important to me, and there was like 4 that was important to everybody else.
Hmm.
So I was spinning my wheels, getting frustrated, and like forcing myself on people for 6 out of 10 things. I mean, that hurts relationships and that hurts a culture.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I was doing it because what we were doing was working until a few people left, and then we didn't need that anymore. But what I did find out is 4 out of the 10, they didn't require me anymore. They were maintained because people cared and it had become culture.
Yeah.
So I guess really trying to same thing, have some of that humble pie and recognize that culture is more important than you are. And culture includes you, but it's not up to you. So
Hmm.
you got to kind of see what's working at a place and then find out how to partner with it and then carry an influence. Un- Unless you're brought in as a change agent, right? If you came into the training department to completely renovate the training program, yeah, cowboy up.
Yeah.
But otherwise, become part of the culture and then influence the culture. But if you come in too hot, you don't even know why the way is, why something is the way it is. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to change that.
Yeah. For sure.
I haven't always done a great job with that.
Okay.
So I recommend that for people. Go
Cool.
slow.
I like it. I like it.
Hmm.
Integrate before you make a change, which means you have to be pretty stable in what you think and how you believe. You know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
go in to integrate and maybe in the beginning you see some of those problems that you think are problems in your own head, but I'm going to spend my time getting into the culture. I'm going to spend my time getting into the firehouse, learning the guys, letting them learn me, and then maybe one day I'll start to try to make a change on this, try to influence certain aspects that I might still see as a
Yeah.
problem. But you've got to be pretty stable in your level of belief as to what you think too. To continue
Yeah.
through that process and not let certain negativities impact the way you look at things.
Yeah. That's facts. It's funny with like the way we work now is 48-48, and so you're always with the same people.
Yeah.
Some of the other departments I worked at was 48-72. So day 1 and day 2 are different because there's 14 different schedules. So there's the people you usually work with,
Mhm.
but you don't always work with the same people. So 2 or 3 people might jive, and man, everybody's in the day room, everybody's eating, we're going grocery shopping together, we're working out together. The next day, everybody's in their room because 1 or 2 people came or went, and the culture's all different.
Yeah.
Like people don't get along. And I always found that interesting. So it's like have you guys ever heard of the Enneagram?
Not right off.
So the
I'm not-
Enneagram, it was like this personality thing where it's super creepy if you want to be creeped out. You take this quiz or whatever, then it tells you your different attributes.
Oh yeah,
The thing that I liked about the Enneagram is I studied it for me and my wife because we're polar opposite. But there's a way for me to be 100% me, but be a better partner for you because your ears work a certain way. So when I say this is what I mean, but this is what you hear. Studying the Enneagram a little bit, I learned the lens through which my wife sees the world. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I am super offensive. I don't mean it like that, but if that's how you hear things,
Yeah.
like if she's going to be my bride, couldn't I change the way I use a sentence? Like, is that too much to ask?
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Frame the sentence different. So I started using that at work with people, and maybe we get on scene and I was the medic on scene. So I'm like, hey, go ahead and give me a set of vitals. And that means one thing to somebody else. But if I say, hey, go ahead and give me a blood pressure, a pulse, and then the pulse ox, but start with the blood pressure. And then you give me a 4 lead. One person, that's vitals. To another person, they need the individual pieces. So instead of getting frustrated with people, how about I just learn how to communicate and who I'm working with? I can still be me, but I need to be a part of us.
Yeah.
Those have been the biggest issues in my career is when I forget that I'm supposed to be a part of us and I start trying to assert my will over who I am and what I think is right. I need to know who I am, but I need to recognize how we work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
That is hard. And so really coming into new places and recognizing who you are and being able to take a back seat, knowing you might be talented at something, but recognizing somebody else might be the guy. Well, let's build some professional and personal equity. And then I bet I can be brought into the fold.
Yeah.
Right. Or you just wait for that big call and then they're like, man, you're worth your salt and you're in.
Sure.
But either way, right, you can't rush it either way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't remember what the question was. I think I went on a tangent.
No, it's okay. I like where that tangent went. That was good.
Yeah.
That was really good. No, cool. A lot to think about. I like that. It's a big humility thing, and like you were talking about humility with knowing, what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then having a learning mindset. I think is kind of the basis of what you're talking about. If you don't have a learning mindset and you're not humble about what you know and what you think then you're being part of the problem. You're adding to the negativity of the culture in the area. So, no, I like it. It's good. Let's talk about yeah.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
That's kind of what I like with Jump Bag and my side project and just like, or my small business and teaching is you got to create a safe space.
Yeah.
So we're firefighters, we're type A personalities. We spend a lot of our time catching each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that was big in the Marine Corps. We were always posturing. We were always like waiting for somebody to screw up or waiting for something to pick apart. Okay, that's good and all that. And I know that works for some cultures, but I think overall, a lot of times we spend a big chunk of our time trying not to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in this organization for this amount of time. I really ought to know what this building looks like or how to use this piece of equipment. I don't, and I've been here too long to display that. So I'm going to posture. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to undermine the class. I'm going to try to be funny. I'm going to try to do a lot of distracting so that I don't get caught.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't like that. I mean, we got to be free to make mistakes because none of us are perfect. But I mean, if you're free to make mistakes, then you're free to try things and it's a safe place. If you're not, you're just trying not to get caught. And in this career field, in our job, you either catch it during training and catch it during truck checkout, or you get caught on scene. Bottom line.
Yeah.
That's it. You're out of batteries. You catch it in the morning, or you get on scene and you don't have something you need. You either going through training, you're like, I don't know how to use that, or I had a misunderstanding of that, or you get on scene, somebody asks you to use it and the building burns down, or somebody dies because you're putting on AED pads upside down, like and putting the sticky side up. Like you catch it in training or during truck checkout, or you get caught on scene.
Yeah.
That requires a safe place where people can make mistakes and it doesn't follow them for their whole career.
Mm-hmm. One of those things, like on that same topic, one of those things that I heard when I first came into the fire service was fake it till you make it, or when you walk in the door, act like you've been there before, And I've been known to use those sayings, act like you've been there before. But what it comes down to is you got to have that education ahead of time, especially in a job where things can kill people, You have to have that knowledge ahead of time, and you have to be humble enough to know that you don't have that knowledge and you need that knowledge. So like you're saying, you have to be able to make mistakes. You have to be able to ask stupid questions. You have to be able to say, I don't know this crap. Can somebody freaking teach me? You know what I mean? Before we're going into this house and I don't know how to use this piece of equipment. Before I got an engine company waiting to go inside and I don't know how to use a rabbit tool to pop this door.
That's kind of important.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. I like that. That's good stuff too.
I think that's a big important thing with this podcast in general is just it kind of pinpoints the need in the volunteer service of we're expected to be professionals when we show up, but if your volunteer department does no training, how are you supposed to be professional? So this kind of highlights a lot of that disconnect where some departments are like, oh, we're fine. We train twice a year. We're good. It's not. So
no, it's that camaraderie. Like how my scene management changed once I learned the Enneagram and I started communicating different.
Yeah.
I was still me, but I was working with different people. Like how arrogant have I had to be for my whole life to think I'm chronically right?
Yeah.
Or that people need to yield to the way I want to say something. Like, seriously, it doesn't work in my living room. Why would I expect it to work anywhere else?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's like the mentality of I'm a straight shooter. I'm going to tell you how it is. When really, maybe they don't need that. Maybe they would learn better if you would change the way that you approach the situation.
Yeah. Know your people, because sometimes you got to be in somebody's face. That's how they learn. So what I try to do, and sometimes I'm sensitive, but be critical, but be accurate.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be a jerk, be accurate. I can do something with that. If you're just going to be a jerk, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know when I'm wrong, and I don't know when you're wrong, because you're just a jerk all the time. Sometimes you got to get in people's faces and the fake it till you make it, and act like you've been there before. It all depends on the environment, right? Like if you show up on a CPR, confidence and fear are contagious. So you better bring one, right?
Yeah.
You make order of that issue, because we've all been a part of good codes where it got real boring real fast. It's the same 4 things over and over and over until they make it or they don't. Yep. Right. And then we've been on the ones where, everybody's still crying and everybody's sweating and you're frantically looking for stuff. Confidence or fear. That's where you pretend like you've been there before, and somebody's got to be confident, and it's going to be contagious. And all of a sudden the scene is managed, and maybe you should have changed a few things. You could have done something different, but you can talk about it because you weren't thinking too fast, where you can't even absorb what's happening in the environment. You've got to be in a safe place with the people you work with so you can perform and fail, and somebody else can step in when you're failing. For medical, somebody puts on a nasal cannula upside down, right? We've seen that. And you walk over, hey, dummy, why do you do this, right? Well, now the patient doesn't know whether you're the idiot or he's the idiot. Yep. All they know is that they're sick and there's an idiot on scene.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help. Why don't we be hey, man, let me adjust this for you. And then I'm going to drive home with them. That's a perfect place to talk about it.
Sure.
Don't yell at me on scene, yell at me in the cab.
Yeah.
we're going to lose the patient, we're going to lose the scene, but you got to fake it till you make it almost when you're on scene, as long as you're in that healthy environment where we're not going to set each other up for failure. You're going to get that 5'3" new firefighter female to go throw the extension ladder because she ought to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You got like a 6'5" bodybuilder right there. Like, that's just a misuse of resources.
Yeah.
To prove a point. But yeah, that part is hard. How to utilize your resources, how to communicate well, how to leverage professional and relational equity, and just be humble and then carry that confidence, because they almost seem like there shouldn't be a relationship between those two.
Yeah.
But there is.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense.
Anyways, I'm preaching again. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I like it.
And by the way, I don't do all this stuff.
You don't do all of it.
Yeah. These are all just opinions that I can't walk out. So I'm just going to throw that up there. I try. I don't got it.
Cool. Well, let's talk about San Diego some more. Let's talk about I've got in here a note talking about the salty captains that you worked with.
Oh yeah. So Danny King was his name. He was the smartest man in the room, and everybody knew it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you would just, like I said before, if you will just shut up and color and listen, you will learn.
Yeah.
So he was old school, right? But turns out he's got 20 years of experience on you. So you and I can butt heads when we're both trying to get that crew chief position, because we've both been in for 15 years and we're equal, right? We're equal.
Mm-hmm.
When there's 20 years experience between you and the guy above you, if he wants to talk down to you, maybe I don't like it, but at least it makes more sense, right? Like, there's a certain level of authority that goes along with that experience. Sure. And so Danny had it. Him and Rick Brainey were the two crew chiefs at Station 16, where I got my medic position, and I was a well-fed cat because they had seen it all, they had done it all, so I could cut my teeth on the ambulance and cut my teeth in that new environment and know that they weren't going to let me kill myself or somebody else.
Yeah.
That they knew what they were doing. And so I really had a lot of freedom to develop and gain confidence and gain competence and get well-rounded. One of my favorite things about Captain King was he would not yield to what he thought was right. He would not yield. So at Station 16, we had like 13 piers, and you could have anywhere from 6 to 8 ships per pier. And these are can be like small aircraft carriers for like Harriers and like helicopters, like large ships. Well, all of them need drills so often for fire response. So you literally could do nothing but just shipboard fire drill after shipboard fire drill after shipboard fire drill all day, every day, and still be behind. So they had to kind of work it out what we were going to do and kind of bring us in for the major ones. Well, things change over time. So where you might have a good goal, like the objective and the application sometimes get divorced, right? So like, we're going to do a shipboard drill. Well, now administratively, we're going to figure out how to make that work. And then after a little while, they're divorced and you're no longer doing business the way you should. You're doing it off a checklist to meet these criteria, right?
Mm.
Danny would have none of that. None of it. So we would go to these shipboard drills, and there'd be all like these full bird colonels and all these really important people to watch this drill, right? And they'd be laying out how we were going to do this. And they would say, you're going to do this, this, and this. And he'd go, that's not how we fight fire. They would say, yeah, but for the drill, we're going to do this. He's like, no, you don't hear me. That's how you guys do this. That's not how we fight fire. That's contrary to SOPs and how I'm going to train these guys. We're not doing that. And they said, well, no, it's just for this drill. And he'd say, I am not developing their muscle memory off of false practices. And they would say, well, this is what we're going to do. And he'd go, get in the truck. And we'd leave. The chief would come flying into the parking lot and come squalling out. The doors would lock. We'd hear him yelling. Chief would get in the car, squealing tires, go pulling out, right? And then Danny would go outside and smoke his cigarette, and you wouldn't talk to him like for the rest of the day. And then 2 weeks later, we'd go to a shipboard drill, and Danny would go, that's not how we fight fire. Get in the truck, guys.
Get in the truck.
And I mean, yeah, he was being a butthead.
Sure.
But, when we had those shipboard fires, we were ready.
Yeah.
We were ready as we could be for an aircraft carrier to be on fire. Like, how ready can you be for that?
Sure.
But he made sure that we weren't
You were
getting
practicing
false
wrong.
talent. No. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, just those times of driving off the pier and not doing the training and having everybody get yelled at probably saved lives. Because right after I left San Diego, there was a major aircraft carrier fire.
Yeah.
Major. Like the fire burned through like 7 stories of solid steel decks.
Nice.
And
I saw that. I saw that on the Instagram page.
that was across the street from my station there in San Diego.
Yeah.
It was like across the street and 1 pier over. Firefighters would have died. I can almost guarantee if it wasn't for Danny King and Rick Brainey, and they were both retired at that point.
Heck yeah.
So hats off to them. They were awesome.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's pretty cool. It's good to have strong leadership that recognizes when things are wrong, and they have their opinions, but they stick to them. Especially when they're right.
Yeah. Well, really hard to work with them. I'll tell you that.
Sure.
I loved working with them because I could shut up and color. If you just shut up and listen, you'd learn a lot and it would be over faster. But if you tried to listen, everybody knows that he's going to be right and he's going to put you in your place. Everybody already knows that. So stop arguing. It's not going to change anything, and it's not embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like you just happen to be that guy today. So shut up. Shut up and take it, and we'll move on. But yeah, so he was rough to work with, but he was good. People, when he retired, all of a sudden there was a transfer list to 16.
Yeah.
But people were
You
scared.
wouldn't want to be there anymore.
Mm-hmm. You get 20 years on you. You know what I mean? It's different when somebody's got a level of authority that just they've been there and done that longer. But when you're on the same footing, that's when you get in those pissing contests.
Yeah.
Trying to assert yourself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So talking about shipboard fires, let's talk about the Black Friday fire.
Oh yeah. That was pretty crazy. We had so the station there, we had a brush truck that was cross-staffed, 2 engines with 4 people, and then an ambulance with 2 people. So we typically had 1 or 2 medics on at a time, and then 10 personnel. It was Black Friday, and so it was a shipyard, and so there's only like a skeleton crew that actually lives on the ship at any given time, and everybody else goes to like their apartments or whatever. Oh, let me plug my computer in here. It came unplugged. But the base was kind of empty, right? So there was just like a skeleton crew. And also we ORM did a little bit, or operational risk management a little bit. And so we had, I think, 9 people instead of the 10. Mm-hmm. Nobody's on base, right? Like, so how much support do you need when nobody's on base?
Yeah.
Well, with shipboard firefighting, it's basically a pizza oven. And so if you look at like a cube or like a dice, there's 6 sides. Well, on a shipboard fire, you need to know what's on each of the 6 sides, because it is a steel room that is now getting hot. So it could start fires here. So what's next to it? Is it a munitions room? Is it a hazmat storage locker? Is it a fuel area? Like, is it a berthing area where people sleep? What is it that's over there, right? So you got to know what's in all 6 areas. But every ship is different, even if it's the same type of ship. So they're all going to be laid out a little different. A ladder well might go down 3 decks, but not 2. So you bypass the complete deck. So it can be a maze even getting in and out. So shipboard is kind of terrifying.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? It just gets hot. You can be on the wrong floor and burning up.
Yeah.
Because everything's so hot and there's not even fire near you.
Yeah.
So Black Friday, we had 9 people on that day. We ORM'd it, so we were 1 person short. We had a couple of new people. Mm-hmm. So they had gone through a fire academy, but they needed a certain amount of time on shift before they got their cert. So they were a little bit of quality people, but they were a little bit of a gopher. They weren't allowed to go in. They weren't, they were going to be assisting the fire chief for stuff. So we also had an engine that was down. So we had the brush truck in service. We had a relief new driver, and that was neighbor Nate on the pumper. I was on the brush truck. Crewing. I just gotten an engineer position, and my captain hurt his knee, and so then I was crewing a lot. So I was pretty new at crewing, but I was on the brush truck with 1 person who can't respond. And anyway, so we had a call for a smell of smoke. Mm-hmm. We start driving away from the station, and then we look up and you can see smoke, and you're like, okay, we got something, right? So we go all the way down. We pull in, and it was a minesweeper. So it's a partially wood ship, and it's smaller. So it's not like you got to go up the 7 flights to get to the flight deck so you can kind of see what you got. It was almost like eye level, but it was still, you still had to take like a ladder well over to the ship. And it was also inside like a fence area. It wasn't a great area of access. So we had to cut some stuff, get around so we can get in there. And then I want to say it was like a 600-foot lay to the hydrant around a fence. So we got there, and there's smoke pouring out of this thing. And the Navy is abandoning ship. It was a skeleton crew anyways. There wasn't a ton of people. And like I said, every ship is a maze. So typically when you get on there, you go find whoever's running instant command, and you kind of do a unified command type of thing. And you say, what is it? Where is it? What's around it? What's been done? And what do you need? Right. And then we figure out how we can assist them. Well, they're abandoning ship. There's nobody to talk to.
Yeah. So
we're like, all right, we got to get over there. So we get on the ship, we throw a rope over so we can get, basically it was like a 3-inch line across so we could put our hotel packs on and then make entry into the ship. And now the ships have their own fire suppression systems, but the Navy fights fire different than we do because they actually go into the IDLH and they grab their lines and they fight fire within the IDLH. We don't do that. We go in with our water, right? We don't test their equipment. So we don't know the status. So we're not going into a death hole without,
Sure. You're going to use something works.
Yes. Yeah. So we're getting ready to go in there. Well, I get up on the flight deck. There's like 3 or 4 sailors, and they're standing there with a limp hose line. And I was like, hey, are you guys going to use that? And they just kind of go, all right. And I grab it, and I'm like, there's no pressure. This isn't right. We set it down. We bring our line over. At this point, we have no idea where the fire is or what's going on. We're told that there was an engine fire and it was upstairs, which in hindsight makes no sense because engine rooms are not upstairs, but we're standing in a smoking ship. I wasn't thinking real clear. So it was me and my buddy, and we're there, and I looked at him, he looked at me, and I'm like, well, let's go. So we masked up, we grabbed our line, and then we just walked into this smoking metal hole with just smoke rolling out. Well, 99% of the time you don't need a tick, right? Because it's just a nothing call. Bad muscle memory. I got caught.
Yep.
I didn't bring the tick. So now I'm doing a right-hand search pattern for a fire on a ship.
How many doors do you find on that?
My bad. My bad. Well, so we're doing the right-hand search pattern, and it's hot, right? And just continuing to get hot, and it's continuing to get hot, and we're looking for the ladder well up, and we made it all the way back to like where this galley was, and it was cooling off, and we're like, this isn't right. But you can't see anything anyways, but it just like the smoke got a little grayer. So we start working our way back. We get to almost like this cross section, and there's just this guy standing there. And I'm like, hey, and he's got the pack on, all that. I said, do you know where the fire is? And he's like, I said, and I'm like, where is the fire? And he goes like this, and then he's just gone. I'm like, okay, well, let's hope he's okay. Like, let's just hope he's okay. So we turned the direction he was facing, and it was like a little alleyway in. It was like a little landing, and then you could feel the door, and the ship doors are like the engine room doors are different because they lock down different. Because for fires and for, to be seaworthy, you got to be able to keep air out. You got to be able to keep water out. They got to be airtight and watertight. So we find it. We're like, okay, this is an engine room door. So now we're standing there. And so if we would have walked in initially through that first hatch from that area that we entered, it was like 20 feet. Then you had about a 4-foot landing, and then there was a door coming back towards the direction we came on the other side of a steel wall. So it was me and my buddy. We had other crews that were coming in. So we opened the door, and then heat's coming.
Yeah.
It's hot. It looks like, it's just all black. You can't see anything. When a ship's in harbor like that and it's getting renovated, there might not be a floor in the engine room. So you might have a ladder well that's like this steep. It's not like a normal flight of stairs. It's like this, almost straight up and down. It could just be a ladder you go up and down. It could be all kinds of things. And at the bottom, there might not be a floor. Or they might have like 2x6s that you walk on as you go down the different levels to get to the different parts of the engine and the hydraulics and yada, 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 right? There's nobody there to tell us. All we know is we found a smoking hole, and if we
Mhm.
don't do something, this ship is going to sink into the San Diego harbor.
Mhm.
So, the whole what's it called? It's not the stove, it's the fireplace effect. Help me on this. I can't remember. When you're going to a basement fire,
Yeah.
the smoke is coming up,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
chimney
yes.
effect.
The chimney. Yeah.
So there's going to be a chimney effect. It's going to be hot. We don't know how many stairs there are. We don't know if there's anybody down there.
Mhm.
We don't know what's on fire, and we don't know if there's a ground. But there's only one way to find out, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're
There
gonna
you
start
go.
eating stairs one at a time and get down there and find out what's going on. So we kind of feel around on the landing. We find the ladder well. Me and my partner switch. He was on the nozzle. Now I went over to the front of the nozzle. He'd been doing work, and now we found
Mhm.
this ladder well. So he switched around behind me. Good dude, by the way. He got his medic license too, and he's just a solid guy. Matt Mather, solid dude. I love that guy. Well, so we get on the ladder well, and then we're going down. So that's thick like this. So we're laying down. You got the line, and you're kind of feeling one step at a time, trying to make sure that the ladder well is still there,
Mhm.
and trying to see where the ground was. And it's just hot. Like, you couldn't grab the railing because it was burning your hand through your glove. It was just hot, and it's like, okay, one step at a time, and we'll just see where we get. Well, we got probably 6, 7, 8 stairs down, and it's getting real hot, and it's getting real bad, and it started where you start to feel a little bit of panic, like this is not good. And then I heard my buddy's voice, who was from the station almost across the street. It was from a different base, but it was the wet side and dry side of
Mhm.
the basically the base we were on, and he was solid. Like, he's the guy you want on scene. Him and his crew. So I hear his voice, and I'm like, I need a few more stairs. If something happens, they'll get me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, his name is Anthony Glorioso, by the way. I got to drop these nuggets where private
That's
and
good.
praise. I'm sorry, private and accountability and public and praise. These people are.
Yeah.
Anthony's awesome. So I hear his voice, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to keep eating stairs. So
Mhm.
we're going further and down, further and down. It's getting hotter and hotter. Everything is pitch black. You can't see anything. And you see that little orange haze kind of like rolling, right?
Mhm.
I'm already leaning back. I just grab the line. I open it, kind of hit. I shut it down. Instantly, I get nauseous, like I'm going to vomit. My whole mask fogs up. Everything starts doing this whole number, getting
Mhm.
small. So I gave it a little head shake. I see that little bit of orange coming again. I hit it. I close. Everything disappears black again. Everything starts getting small, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. This is it for me. I got to get out of here. So I'm like, hey, that's it. And so Matt's like, yeah, that's it. And so Anthony and his crew's coming down. I give him the line. Going up those stairs, I'm like, okay, about 15 stairs, about 4 feet, a left-hand turn, and then 15 feet. And then I'm in the open air. Don't pass out till you get there. Like, that's it. That's all you got to do. Just get out there, and they can drag me to whatever, but like, just don't pass out till you get there. So I'm making my way out, and we're kind of like feeling, and somebody's guiding us, and everybody's wiping my mask, and they're and I can't see anything. And so we get out, and man, I'm smoking, like smoking. It's just coming off me. My mask, it was like gunpowder on my mask. Everybody was trying to wipe it off. It was caked. It was like cake batter.
Mhm.
That place was so ready to flash. Was like so ready to flash. So we went over to rehab, and we sat there for a while. We got some fabric, and we were like wiping the stuff off. My boom mic melted.
Mhm.
My part of my like stream light it was all, the texture was all gone. I had to clean the lens of that because it was like all that caked up stuff.
Sure.
And so we gave 15, 20 minutes. Our vitals came down, and then we're like, all right, round 2. So we grabbed our cylinders, we went back down there. At that point, things were starting to get better. We ended up saving the ship.
Cool.
Had we not go in, that ship would have sunk.
Yeah.
It would have burned through. The part of the wall was like bowing, where you could see the heat was expanding. We got some really good pictures where, some thick, like 8x8 studs were like halfway through burnt. It was hot. And so essentially what had happened is a hydraulic fire started. They had a halon system, but in order for the halon to work, you got to shut all the doors. They escaped through one of basically the engine room hatches, but they didn't close the other one. So they hit the halon. It escaped. The fire kept burning. They hit the second halon. It kept burning, right? And then it burned through their fire suppression system.
Yeah.
So they lost their suppression system. They lost all their halon. they were already a skeleton crew. They were out of resources and out of
What
options.
else are you gonna do?
When we got there? That was terrifying. But Danny King and Rick Brainey, they beat into us the fundamentals. I wish they would have beat into me a little bit more the tick.
Mm-hmm.
Might have found it 5 minutes earlier had I had a tick. My bad.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah.
I'll forget something.
Yeah.
My first structure fire ever, I forgot my helmet, so it happens.
Yeah, it happens. You had a mask, you know.
Yeah. What else you need?
90%. But
so that's
if it
cool.
wasn't for those fundamentals,
Yeah.
that ship probably would have burnt. And the only reason, I mean, literally, the only reason why I went in is because I heard Anthony's voice.
Yeah. It's
like how
it's
important
neat
is
to
we work with.
It's neat too looking at these ship fires where basically you're coming from the outside world. You got to go down and find this fire. You're creating a chimney for you to walk through. You know what I mean? One of the things we try to avoid in the outside world is chimneys. You know, we try to avoid stairwells. You know, it's a chimney. You know, it's going to be hot. It's going to be very little visibility. But like, if you're on a fire on a ship, well, you don't have a choice. You got to create a chimney and go through it. You know,
well, hopefully not. Like, hopefully not, because if you've got somebody there that can guide you, they can show you 3 or 4 different ways to get in there. And the way the Navy fights fire is it's a little different. They got smoke curtains, right? So like, if a fire is in room A, they're going to go back to the doorway or the hatch between room B and C, and they're going to put a thick canvas curtain, like leather curtain, in between the two. And it's going to act like a smoke curtain. And so now this is your point of your IDLH. And so everybody's going to gear up on the other side of the smoke curtain. You're going to go inside the curtain, grab your hose so you're not breaking your curtain, and you're going to go fight fire.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to approach it differently, or try to approach it on the same level to get to the fire. When there is no curtain, there is no smoke curtain, when there is no fire suppression system, and there are no shipboard firefighters, you're just on a scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
So it should have never been that way.
Yeah.
But it also should have never been on fire. So it's like, you're going to pick something apart. Why don't we just start with the fire, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But it was wild because we were so short staffed. We only had 9 people. One of them wasn't allowed inside the facility. We had a relief driver. Let me tell you, neighbor Nate, relief driver. We ended up calling for foam, right? Well, something that we don't think about a lot is there's only certain discharges that provide foam.
Yeah.
So if you don't initially use that discharge, how do you get foam?
Switch to the other discharge.
Unless that's 1 3/4 or like the 2.5 coming off, and you've got a 3-inch going over a ship.
Yep.
Like what you've got there is what you have there. So they're like, we're calling for foam.
Going over a ship.
Yeah. So we threw a 3-inch line and then connected the Y and then put our lines in through there.
Gotcha.
So, not like we were talking about earlier, the floating standpipe, because it was almost parallel. It was almost even. Like the ship was just a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But they called for foam, and Nate sat back and he was like, and this is a relief driver, but this was what it's like to be underneath Danny King and Rick Brainey. And he's like, we didn't use a foam discharge, but the bumper line is a foam discharge. So I can circle that back to the intake, and I can just foam the whole pump, and then you'll have access through your 3-inch.
Makes sense.
And the insect commander's like, nah, it's all right. We'll figure something else out. But this was a relief driver who just figured out how to provide foam.
The issue.
Yeah. So
You
after
literally start navigating the pump.
and we're like, we'll just have to clean the crap out of this. But this is a pretty significant fire. This is like our worst case scenario on a Navy base when a ship is about to sink to the ground or sink to the bottom of the ocean.
Do what you got to do at that point.
Yeah. And so after that, when we realized what was going on and how we only have certain foam discharges, we created a pony roll, just like a little jumper. And we had that up in the roof by the deck gun because that was a foam discharge. So we're like, hey, in the event that we have to do this again, we can take the tip off, throw the bumper on there, or the jumper, throw the jumper down, and we could connect our lines. And now we've got a foam discharge, if we can't do it any other way, through the deck gun.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we were pretty proud of ourselves. We thought that was pretty clever. We never had to use it, but we had to come up with a plan B. So you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went with our normal plan of attack until we realized we needed foam. Then we're like, our plan sucked.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I talked a lot, but
No,
that was
you're good.
crazy.
That's good. I like it. It's neat because it's a different style of firefighting. You have to do things differently. Ventilation's got to be a pain.
Mm.
I didn't even think about that until you were talking about it. Ventilation's got to be a pain in a
That, and you got to figure out where is the water going to go? Because the
Mhm.
ship can only take so much water.
Yeah.
Where is the superheated gas going to go? How are you going to funnel that out? What are the different avenues to get there? Where can we shuttle it through?
Mhm.
It's
Did y'all use like positive pressure ventilation and negative pressure ventilation? I feel like a smoke extractor would be perfect for situations like that.
I'm trying to remember what we even did. We ended up setting up fans for like 4 or 5 days afterwards.
Mhm.
And I mean, we were there for probably a couple days, just watching for hot spots,
Yeah.
taking different tours up and down and up and down. And we ended up setting up fans. But prior to that, I want to say probably 30 to 45 minutes into fight and fire, we set up some ventilation fans so we could see a little better.
Yeah.
But I want to say it took like 30 or 45 minutes. And that was a Glorioso thing again. I think his guys went through like 7 bottles.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we went through 3 bottles. Anthony was he's a different animal.
Yeah. No, that's cool. All right, let's start working towards New Mexico. Let's start working towards that. You went from. We're not going to harp on New Mexico for long, but I feel like it's got a pretty big impact. It's had a pretty big impact on your paramedic side.
Yeah, I really did.
So let's talk about New Mexico a little bit. How long were you at San Diego until you moved to New Mexico? Why'd you move to New Mexico? All that stuff.
Well, we were in San Diego for about 5 years. Things were going really well there, and we thought we were going to be there for a while. But then, honestly, we just really felt like God was calling us somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I won't even go into all the series of events, but there was like this series of events that basically like laid out a red carpet to go to Albuquerque, somewhere that had never been on the map or been on the plane for us before.
Mm-hmm.
Never even considered it. So we really just felt like a very clear focus and guidance to go to Albuquerque. And so we went there, and like I said, the red carpet was rolled out. Well, we got there, and I want to say it was March of 2020, and the world was beginning to shut down.
Yeah.
With COVID. And so they actually snuck me into an HR room and had me sign a document so I could start, because they were going to lock it down. And I was already done with San Diego, but I wasn't gonna be allowed to start in Albuquerque. So we just would have been in a new state, not knowing anyone, and I wasn't allowed to work.
Yeah.
So they snuck me in and then got me started. And that was an EMR fire department ran by the Air Force that was transitioning to ALS. So they were going to get a paramedic program, and they were supposed to be the pilot program for the Air Force to kind of like how we were going to do paramedicine in the Air Force. And then the Air Force was coming up with their own EMT program to become nationally registered so that the Air Force firefighters could become EMTs. Because at this point, some would be EMTs, some would be EMRs, and there really wasn't any medics. So that was different. I went from an ALS organization to an EMR organization who was trying to do ALS in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, everything was wanting to shut down, and you weren't allowed to be in the room with anybody. You weren't allowed to do anything. And I mean, I was struggling because we're in an EMR department and it's coming, right? This was early on and we didn't know what it was. And it's like, it's coming. We're not allowed to go home. We're not allowed to take leave. We're not allowed to not be here, but we're not allowed to be with each other so we can go on these calls. We're going to have no idea what we're doing when we get there. And in fact, there's no way around it for us. If it comes and if it gets here, we are going to be the ones showing up. How are we not training?
How did that affect the culture as far as like, having to be separate from everybody else in the firehouse? How did that go down?
Well,
How
everybody, go ahead.
you're coming into this new department with new guys, new crews,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you have rules where you can't talk to anybody. You know, that's a
Yeah.
big freaking deal. Like one of the biggest things we do is eat dinner together. You know,
Yeah.
even in the volunteer world, our department's really good about it. Every Friday night we go have dinner at the firehouse, pretty much.
Yeah.
Friday nights, Saturday nights, all weekend we're at the firehouse with people.
Mhm.
Sometimes randomly throughout the week. I mean, even as a volunteer department, we still know that plays an integral part of our culture and how we respond to each other. So now you're working with these people every day, and you're not allowed to eat together. You're not
Yep.
allowed to, hold hands under the bathroom stall, whatever. You know,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to do anything.
Not allowed to train. They don't even
Not
know
allowed
if I can get the hydrant.
to train. Yeah,
Like, they don't know
that's
anything about me.
that's crazy.
We were there probably 2 weeks, and I didn't have a mask because the fit test was done in a different station.
Hmm.
So I was assigned to a different station, but I had to go at the headquarters station to start. Well, I was just there for almost 2 weeks, but I wasn't allowed to do anything because I couldn't go to my station and I couldn't get a mask. So I was just there.
Yeah.
I was just there. So we ended up, finding a way to get over there and do a fit test and all that. And um, because we were going ALS, there was already some interest like, hey, we know we need help medically. So I was given a lot of rope and I was given a lot of grace with the people we worked with, and they were really open arms. So, I mean, you know how it goes. We're still going to eat together.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're still going to, there's only so much we're not going to be able to do, but it was very limiting. There was only like 2 people out in the gym at a time. There's only like 3 people out in the kitchen at a time eating. Um, everybody had to be wearing their masks, and 4 times a day we had to clean the doorknobs and just all this crazy, crazy stuff. Uh, but then after a little while, we started just kind of doing voluntary training
Hmm.
and saying like, hey, this is what COVID is. This is what respiratory illnesses are. This is how you don and doff an N95. This is how you don and doff your gloves. This is what it looks like with our protocols. This is the gear that we have in our bags. This is what it looks like when I do this or I ask for this. How do you guys normally do this? So I know how to work with you. And it started off with like 2 or 3 people. And before long, just everybody pretended they didn't see it. And pretty much 13, 14, 15 people would be trying to socially distance in one room doing medical training off the books. And so that helped us. It helped knowing that they were going to go to EMT and that we showed up as ALS providers to help establish an ALS program. There was that, like I was talking about Captain King, there was that 20-year difference. I'm not saying medics are better than anybody else, but in the EMS program, it was like medics and EMRs. And so we had to close the gap. So there was a certain amount of professional authority given with the assumption that we had something to offer that they didn't have yet. So there wasn't a lot of proving that. It was just kind of understood that we were coming from different places with different call volumes and different experiences, and we were there to launch ALS. And so they were essentially letting us do that on the floor.
Yeah.
Management had their own hurdles. I mean, it was COVID and life safety and a whole other list of drama I won't get into, but on the floor, they were really supportive to launch this ALS because they didn't have all the administrative hoops they had to jump through dealing with the big Air Force and all the things that went along with COVID.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how we started to get along, is we were sneaking doing training and then we were still grilling together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Because you just can't not have interaction with people, especially in this job. It's just a line of work where you have to interact with people.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, even when it comes to like EMS calls, you're interacting with people. Like,
Yeah.
we're trying to stay away from COVID, but yet if grandma has COVID, she goes into respiratory distress, we're going to pick her up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How away from COVID do you want me to stay?
You're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's coming, we have to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, I mean, I struggle with that. That was the Danny King coming out in front of me. Like, I was like,
Sure.
hey, I know what we're supposed to do. Does anybody else think this doesn't make sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
this
like,
is not it.
yeah, we're going to drive in the truck together no matter what.
Yeah.
So
It's like I've seen a thing, some departments that, they'll ask you a question that says, how do you respond to dealing with bloodborne pathogens or, infectious diseases with the patient? It's like, if we're expected to like be okay with that, why are we not expected to be okay with like COVID?
yeah,
It's the same thing.
it's the normal stuff in an abnormal situation, but we're the ones showing up. So like,
Sure.
don't you want us to be ready or ready-ish?
Sure.
That's a tough. I mean, I'm glad I wasn't in management because that's a tough. I mean, people are getting their careers ended over principles.
Mm-hmm.
So grateful I didn't have to be in management because I would have been fired.
Yeah. No, that's good.
They tried anyways, but
Yeah. So eventually, how did everything go with the paramedicine program in Albuquerque? Did you
Not
eventually
great.
get the program running up, or was
Not great.
management holding it all back?
So there was groups of management that wanted to get it done, and there was other groups of management that had other agendas, and good, bad, or indifferent, it just didn't necessarily pan out. So
Sure.
a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. We got a lot of people certified to the EMT level
Cool.
and the EMR level. And actually it was the beta program for the Air Force. So they gave us curriculum and we had a 2-week program. We got about 3 days in, and then we sent it back to the Air Force and said, no, this is not going to work. And they're like, what do you want to do? And so then we ended up going with JV learning, and we did about 3 classes, and with a 100% pass rate. We had one person fail their national registry exam, and he came back and he's like, listen, I didn't do anything you said. And then he did it, and he passed EMR.
Yeah. It's funny when your instructors tell you what you need to do to pass, and then you don't do it and you fail.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, with jump bag, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
We've almost got registry hacked to understanding how it works and the lens through which you need to see the exam.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do the work. It's not a cheat code. However, if you do the normal studying processes and you apply it through this lens, you will move on with your career and just tell the horror stories of National Registry, but you don't have to take it over and over and over and over. You don't even got to be intimidated by it.
Yeah.
So I'd been teaching that for like 10 years by the time we got there. So I was just like, hey, listen, we'll teach the program and I'm going to tell you what to do, and if you'll just do it, you'll pass.
Yeah.
Not me, it's you, because you're doing the work. But I can give you some tools along the way that if you apply, you'll pass.
Like I've said before, if I didn't know this program, your program existed before this, dude. I mean, I failed my EMT a few times, my NR EMT a few times. So, and now most of it was because I didn't do what my instructor told me to. I wasn't listening. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't doing the work. So, but this program sounds like a phenomenal program. I'm excited to talk about that a little later on.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And it was kind of got its teeth cut there because I'd never taught. Everything was like a friend of a friend or somebody I worked with. Yeah. I'd never taught it corporately to like 16 people at a time, going through an EMR and then an EMT course. And I already knew it worked. And then I'm like, okay, it really, really works.
Yeah.
But leaving Albuquerque broke my heart.
Yeah.
It was rough.
It's hard when you go into something and then it doesn't pan out the way you expect it to. Yeah, it's a disappointment. It happens.
There's some great friends there too. We had a great church. Our house was unbelievable. It was probably the nicest. Yeah. I'm hoping it's not the nicest house we'll ever live in, but it was a really, really nice house. We just really felt God's presence in that house and like a divine plan for us.
Sure.
But I don't know what he's doing with it now, but I still got to like lick my wounds over it because went there with a vision and then just wasn't able to walk it out. And then I wasn't playing nice. Okay. So I'm not trying to get into all of this, but I wasn't going to get vaccinated. And I wasn't going to do all the things they were saying. It didn't make sense to me. The research I was doing didn't support it.
Sure.
That's why, and then I prayed about it and I felt like God said, don't do it. So it would have been wrong for me to do it. Doesn't mean it was wrong for everybody. I'm not saying that, but if God tells you to do or not do something, it is wrong for you. Yeah. So I wasn't going to do it. My wife was on board. And then New Mexico said that, you can't practice as a paramedic if you're not vaccinated. So they were trying to take my license. And then the federal government said that I had to, be vaccinated. So they were trying to fire me. And then the Air Force was saying, you got to get it. So I was getting ready to get discharged from that. And then my kids were not able to go to school and have to wear a mask. And Albuquerque was so shut down. They thought they were like San Francisco or New York, and they're not. It's not. It's Albuquerque. So between all that stuff was going on, it was time. It was time for us to go. And I mean, it broke my heart. It really broke my heart. I love Albuquerque. The food is so good, and it is so pretty there.
That's cool. I hope you eventually get out there.
It's not a great place to vacation, I'll tell you that too. There's a lot of prostitution, drugs. You've never met in the fire department. It was so ordinary for somebody to come and say their car was stolen.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. People's cars, few people that got their car stolen 2 or 3 times. It was crazy. I'm like, maybe it's because of COVID. No, from Mexico, there's a north and south and east and west, like right off of Mexico. So it is just a major thoroughfare for drugs, human trafficking, just part of the mystique of Albuquerque.
Sure.
Interesting.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Cool. So Albuquerque. Anything else you want to hit on in Albuquerque?
Balloon Fiesta is awesome. If you ever need to go, Balloon Fiesta is something like you've never seen before. The sunrises, the sunsets. If you're ever passing through Albuquerque, try to get there for a storm. Get some food.
Yeah.
Some really pretty amazing people there. And yeah, man, good food, good people, a lot of crime.
But good food.
Yeah, but good food.
Yeah. That's funny.
That was it.
Yeah. All about eating,
It's all about pros and cons.
Yeah. Sandwiches and convicts, you know what I mean? Like
sandwiches and convicts.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, Alabama. You went from Albuquerque. You had the issues in Albuquerque, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of forced to move somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And you went to Alabama. How did that come about? It's a
So
long ways from Albuquerque.
Yeah, some of the stuff going on with drama and the stuff we wanted with the family. I went from a medic position to a lieutenant position. And then when it was time to leave, I took a firefighter position. So I basically went 2 steps down, probably like a $22,000 pay cut, which is,
it's a big deal when you have a wife and kids.
Yeah. So if you're working towards something, you feel like you're making career progress, and then go back. Well, so I came over here as a firefighter, and I was working out at like a small airfield with Apaches. But the crew was dynamite. So the station is pretty much like, hey, it's pretty close to being condemned. It's not a great facility. It's not a great facility. It's like the bedrooms are almost like a closet. There's room to swing the door open and it'll hit your wall locker in your bed. And the ceilings don't go all the way up, so the air conditioning come through. So it's almost like a cleaning closet that's big enough for a twin size bed. But the crew I worked with was jam up. Like they were just, the crew chief he was a new crew chief, but he was super progressive, and he was just the guy who knew how to get stuff done. And he wasn't like threatened by talent. Good. So whatever talent you displayed, he was going to try to incorporate in the day to day.
Good.
He was an awesome leader. And so I love the dude. His name is Brad. And so we just had a blast. We had an awesome crew. We just recognized, hey, this special season, we probably won't last, because this is just, he went out hunting and he killed a deer, and then we all paid to process it. So our freezer was full of, backstrap and bacon and deer burger. And so we were just eating, we were working out together, we were training. It was just Apaches on this little flight line, kind of, you're on base, but you're almost in the middle of nowhere. And so there was nowhere to go. You're either in the station or you're out on the airfield. There was nowhere else to go. There was nowhere else to park. There was nothing else to do. So we were always just kind of together. And that was really refreshing, because you're just there for the airfield. And so there's not a ton of other stuff going on. So I could really lick my wounds and recognize what it was like to be in a healthier environment for me and my family. And so they were really supportive of that. And then I was probably there I don't know, maybe 9 months. And then I was able to interview for a lead paramedic position, which is a crew chief paramedic. There's one in the department, and that's over on the main side of base. And so I was able to get that position. And this has been a big dose of humble pie, because there's some super talented people there. We were talking about professionalism earlier, and been in the departments where there's like a training calendar, and the trucks are polished, and you wax them on this day, and you wax the floor, and you weed the front garden, and you do uniform inspections on this day. And then here, there's a lot of people with like grease underneath their fingernails and project trucks, and cowboy boots.
Yeah.
But they're roofing houses, and they own gas companies, and they own electricians business, and they're machinists, and like they just simply know how to get stuff done.
Yeah.
They just know how to do stuff. The raw talent isn't necessarily like, oh, we're polished professional firefighters. But believe me when I say they're firefighters, because they know how to get stuff done, and they know how to do a little bit of everything. You put 4 or 5 of them in a room, there's very few things that can't be accomplished.
Sure.
So that's a lot of humble pie, because I'm not from here. I don't know the systems. I don't know the base. I don't know the EMS. And I went from being a tailboard firefighter to being the lead medic, trying to like instigate or institute changes in the EMS program that I actually know nothing about.
Yeah.
So this is where I was talking about, where you really got to be humble, and you got to learn how to grow and not try to overly change things. I think I got ahead of myself in a few areas, and I've had a lot of support, and I've had a lot of pushback. And I think on both sides, a lot of it's been appropriate. And so trying to figure out how to manage that while learning the system, especially in an area where everybody's from here, so they don't have a lot of transplants. So everybody knows everybody. So when you're doing something, like, oh, you go talk to Bill. I'm like, who's Bill? They're like, over the state office. And I'm like, what state office? Like, he's my brother-in-law. I'm like, how am I possibly supposed to know your brother-in-law? Like, how am I, like, help me.
Yeah.
Like, but that's how it is. Everybody knows everybody. Unless you're not from here, then you don't know anybody.
Yeah. My favorite is when you've got, like in our area, when you've got older guys, and they're like, oh yeah, that's down where Eddie used to live.
That doesn't help me.
Where is that?
Wait, Eddie with the Y or IE? They're like, oh, with the Y. Like,
yeah. Oh, that one.
That doesn't help. Yeah, that doesn't help.
I can't base where we're going off of a guy you used to know 30 years ago.
Yeah. That's kind of how it is here. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Very unique department. There's a military component. There's a stage field component where pilots are here getting trained. They'll fly their helicopters out the middle of nowhere. They'll land, they'll take off, and then they'll fly back to where they came. So you have to have firefighting support there for the flight line.
Yeah.
So they're out in the middle of nowhere, 3 guys or 4 guys in a crash truck. And so that's the stage field. And they work basically Monday through Friday, and they have a different schedule. But it's all the same department. And then you have the military that mans their own field, and they've got their own schedule, but it's still part of the department. Then there's fixed station, which is not part of the main base, but they all have an individual airfield that has their own assigned aircraft for pilot training. They are tied to that airfield. So you don't go anywhere because you're tied to the airfield for the crash response.
Sure.
And then there's Station 1, who is actually under a different command and budget. So underneath one department, you've got Station 1, fixed station, stage field, and the military. And that's like 3 different schedules and all the same training responsibilities.
Yeah.
And 2 different budgets.
Yeah, that's a lot of integration.
Yeah,
a lot
so
of things to work around.
I'm going to tip my hat to management, because they're doing great or they're doing poor.
Yeah.
Either way, man, that's a pickle. Pardon my French, but that's a pickle. Like,
yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's
cool.
interesting here.
Yeah, it's neat. You were talking a little bit about how you guys have to, how when you guys are training with the guys at the fixed stations,
Yeah.
how you guys have to kind of like manage each other's schedules a little bit to be able to get some training in.
Yeah, so that even has changed some, because our staffing models went down. We used to have 3 engines, Station 1, and now we have 2. Well, when we had 3, we could still do first and second into any structural or hazmat or rescue, whatever, right? But when they went down to 2 trucks, now you can't, it's difficult to send a truck to cover an airfield. Also, because we're different command structures now, it's almost like we have a mutual aid agreement, even though we're the same department.
Yeah.
So they don't, like, Big Army doesn't necessarily want our Station 1 fire engine to be out at a tray dock fixed station so they can go do training. So if you're just tied to the airfield and you have to be there all the time, how do you get to training to do your live fires?
Yeah.
Especially if there's no apparatus to cover for you. So you have to pay overtime, or you have to, so it makes it very, very interesting. And it makes it difficult trying to utilize teams for training, which is a pickle all on its own, because different stations have different internet capabilities and all of that. So it's very unique.
Yeah. So you run 2 engines out of your house, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got an ALS engine and a BLS engine.
Yes, we're hoping that they just go both engines go ALS, but that's
Sure.
all got to get worked out.
But for now, you've got an ALS engine and a BLS engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like every other department in the world, you guys do mostly EMS stuff, right?
Actually, here it's not. I would say it's probably 50-50.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. So we have the Warrant Officer College here. And so people come from all over the nation to become warrant officers for the Army. And then they're doing their PT tests, and they're running in boots and in uniforms with their rucks on, and it's humid here. So we get those medicals. But then we also have base housing, and there tends to be a lot of smell of gas. Like the stove got replaced or maintenance got done on it. So we actually get a fair amount of fire alarms and a fair amount of smell of gas. And they're normally just like, let's ventilate and whatever. But those are kind of our main bread and butter. And then you do have aircraft emergencies. Like we've had a couple hard landings recently. You've probably seen the news where, like, across the nation, we've lost a few helicopters crash. So we've had a couple of crashes here and there. It's a training base, so pilot training. But it's probably around 50-50, honestly, with the smell of gas and the fire alarms.
Cool.
Because the medicals, you would really think we have more, but it's really not too bad.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's good. That's awesome.
It's a good problem, right?
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah,
for sure. Cool. So
we respond with an ambulance company as well. There's a separate, they're almost across the street from us, but there's a separate ambulance bay, and they're not part of the fire department. They're EMS, but they respond with us. We got the ALS engine and then an ALS ambulance that shows up, and we get there at almost the same time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's what's up. And they're fully staffed all the time.
To the best of their ability, sometimes the truck goes down or somebody's sick, but there's always, I want to say there's supposed to be 2 to 4 people on at all time on the EMS side.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, let's talk about jump bag a little bit.
Yeah. So
that's exciting. First off, real quick, let's talk about why you found the need for jump bag to be a thing. Let's talk about that a little.
I was doing group PT at work.
Yep.
Basketball. And I tore my Achilles tendon.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've been to Station 1 for probably 3 or 4 months. Was just starting to get used to things, kind of forge those relationships, and I tore my Achilles tendon. And then I was at home, and so I was still able to teach for the state EMS office where I'd been teaching. And it just really filled me up. Like, I just really enjoyed the teaching side of it. And so my wife said, well, why don't you want to do more of that? And I was looking back at all the people that I've mentored or pushed towards getting past registry. And I'm like, I really have a knack for this. Like, I know how to get people to the other side of the test.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just, I don't want to sound arrogant or whatever, but it just works.
Sure.
I mean, it just works.
Sure.
So we started kind of putting it together and starting trying to do some like Instagram videos and things like that. But that's ultimately where it kind of jumped off at. the people that I was teaching in EMS school, I was getting really good reviews from them, and they were asking, "Hey, where can I get more of your stuff? I like the way you teach or the way you say things." If you say stuff stupid, people remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just teach stupid, people understand the concepts. Then when they read their textbook, they receive that information differently because there's a context to the content, right?
Sure.
The law of first fruits, you see things through the lens of which it was shown to you that first time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you show people an easy way, all of a sudden they can just absorb information differently. So really try to lean into that. And so my wife and I just thought, like, hey, why don't we try this thing? People are wanting your teaching. It's working. You've got a good track record. So let's put some stuff together.
Yeah.
And so that was just in like November. And we're up to about 2,500 followers on Instagram now. I'm not even sure how many people have gone through the masterclass and the online prep course yet, but probably 30 plus people have passed registry on their next test after taking the program.
Cool.
I only know of maybe a couple people who have had to retest after doing the program. And so it's not EMT school, but you have what it takes if you pass EMT school. Now you just need to learn to apply that information through the lens of National Registry, and then you move on with your life. So that's kind of what it is. Giving people the tools to memorize things silly so they can apply it and remember it, and then apply it through the lens of National Registry.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a good way to do things. I mean, everybody learns differently. For me, I learn by reading, and I've memorized words. Right? I can picture that page in the book when I'm taking a test and I'm answering a question on whatever. Let's just say I'm answering a question on the difference between NPAs and OPAs, and I can reference in my head when I read that in the book. Whereas my wife comes up with these silly rhymes and these like sayings or something that make no sense whatsoever, but somehow she remembers it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like everybody learns differently, and that's cool though that you found a way to like kind of bridge the gap and help those that have a little bit harder time learning.
And I mean, I just really enjoy the teaching spot, and so I teach for it's basically a state office for the region in Alabama, and the guy I work for, Sean, is like he's a top shelf leader. I don't think he knows it, but he's mentoring me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to like sneaky get mentored because the guy is just so sharp and just a very healthy person to be around. But he provides you a lot of rope, like, hey, go ahead and try this. And if it doesn't work, well, hey, that didn't work, and we'll do something else. Like just take some ownership and have some freedom, and let's see where this goes.
Sure.
And so I've been able to teach more and more and more as part of the, it teaches EMR, EMT basic, and then advanced. Well, we've been doing it for about a year now. And at first it was like 15, 20 students per class. And this last semester, word got out that the program is successful. And we've got 70 students between basic and advanced, which is almost like what our goal was for the year. And it's just this one semester.
That's awesome.
And people are passing, like, and a lot of them aren't your typical college students because this isn't a college program. So like a lot of the volunteer departments around here, they don't have time to send people to college, or the resources send people to college. And then there's a huge volunteer community here. And so they've got, they own a auto shop, or they do roofing or plumbing or or they got a farm, whatever, but they want to show up for their neighbors, right? They're going to show up at their neighbor's living room and do work. And so they want to be part of the volunteer department. That is really difficult to get people trained up because EMT is a difficult school.
Yeah.
To do it part-time, voluntarily, and then pay for it. Like that is a huge hurdle. But Sean and the Southeast Alabama EMS office have made this super affordable. We do it through Teams, or you can come into the classroom and be part of a traditional classroom. So if you're on shift, you can sit there and you can watch and get the live lectures. And if you pop a call, you come back and you send an email, and then you'll get the recorded lecture. So then you can catch up the spots you missed.
Yeah.
So it's extremely versatile for people. So and we're getting all these folks that aren't necessarily college students. So their study mechanisms might be different. you know, they haven't been in school for a while, or they weren't interested in going to school, but they want to do this for their department. So it's got its own set of hurdles, but this works. We found a way to do the instruction, put the tools in their toolbox and get them through the program. And listen, they can do the job. They've been doing the job. They just need to be administratively up to date so they can have a greater scope for the things they could already do.
Sure.
So you got to get them through that. They got to pass the course and they got to pass registry so they go out and do good work.
Mhm.
So that part's been interesting too, but it's been a blast because we're just seeing so many people succeed, and I'm getting to meet so many people.
The hardest part about being an EMT is that stinking test.
We can take care of that.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like it.
It's been cool. So my wife does all the computer work, and then I just talk.
Yeah.
And share, and it's been working. I linked up with people like you, and
yeah, for sure.
Jump Medic, we did a giveaway not too long ago. Jump Medic was awesome. Their stuff is really cool. I have a Jeep and I want one of those packs, but somebody's going to steal it.
Yeah.
So
I've had a couple of people actually this week. I think I posted something of theirs on my story on Instagram. I had a couple of people hit me up this week and they were like, dude, where is that? I need to get one of those.
They're awesome.
They've got some good stuff.
Yeah.
I like that they have a customizable option. You can customize what you want in it. You know.
I really like that. And the bags look really quality. So it was cool. I reached out to them to try to do, because I liked their name, you know, Jump Medic and all. Jump Bag EMT and Jump Medic. So we linked up for a giveaway and they were really easy to work with and cool.
Yeah, it's been kind of funny having both of you as sponsors because I've got Jump Bag EMT or Jump Bag, and I have Jump Bag EMT, which is you, and then I have Jump Medic, which is the bags.
Yeah, it's like opposite.
Yeah, it's exactly it. So it's been a thing in my head. I've got notes. I've got like a page where I haven't specifically laid out which name belongs to which company.
Yeah. It's fun.
So it's pretty cool.
I'm jealous of their stuff.
Yeah, they've got some cool stuff for sure. Well, let's talk about the process, right? I'm going through my EMT class, right? What is Jump Medic? Oh, what is Jump? Now you got me all confused. Now, what is Jump Bag gonna do? I'm in my local EMT class, taking EMT. I'm taking EMT on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights from 6 to 10, right? At what point do I get into Jump Bag? At what point do I need to start looking at? I'm going to need some extra help on this. You know what I mean?
Well, so my preference, if I could just have it my way, okay, if I could just have it my way, before people started EMT school, they would go through my NRMT masterclass, because that would paint a picture for them of how to go through school while getting prepared for National Registry. Because EMT school is not National Registry, and National Registry is not the field. They're all three different animals, but there is a bridge unless you're taking them individually. Then it's super clunky. So I wish people would just take the masterclass right in the beginning. It's $20. It's super cheap. It's self-paced, and it gives you everything you need to know like how to study. And then I go live once a week on Instagram for everybody in the masterclass, or not Instagram, but through my website. And then you can ask me any questions you want. And I mean, we can talk CHF, we can talk about IV administration. Whatever you want. I teach this stuff, right? So like, we'll just get together, cut it up and talk about it and you'll understand it. We'll find a way to make that work. But that would be an awesome resource for people going through school. Now, if you've gone through school and you're almost done, or you're completed it, or let's say you failed registry 5 times, whenever you're looking to take National Registry, in my experience, people are 1 to 3 weeks away from passing the exam. If you got a good grip on the content, 1 week. If you're a little soft on the content, 3 weeks. And so I teach it an online NRMT test prep where it's the 3 hours and it's just me and like 2 to 7 people, and we go through it together live. Or in the master class, it's broken up into modules. And so you watch them like 10, 15 minutes at a time, and then you take a practice exam. And the practice exam is not like, when do you use an OPA? It's what are the key words in this question? What is this question actually asking? So
it's teaching you to break down the questions.
Yes, you know how everybody always says like, oh, pay attention to the key words.
Hmm.
How does one do that?
Yeah.
No one ever tells you.
Yeah.
It's just key words, right? Well, that's what that practice exam is for. It actually breaks down the questions. But then also you learn how to make note cards. You learn how to make your test day note sheet. You learn how to prepare confidently. You know how to manage test anxiety. You know how to get centered. You know how to get rid of the distractions. You know how to interpret the questions. You know how to stay the course. And then also you get a study calendar. So it goes all the way up from I think 4 weeks, 3 weeks, and 2 weeks. So if
Mhm.
you're 4 weeks, 3 weeks, or 2 weeks out, this is exactly what you need to do. You're an adult, so adult hard. Like, I don't own you. Like, do you?
Mhm.
But if you don't know what to do, if you just do this, you will pass. If you do something similar to this, you will pass.
Yeah.
And so the calendar is awesome. And then I also have a test bank. So like a practice exam test bank. So you can take your practice tests to get ready for registry through that too. So it's kind of
Cool.
like an all up round. You got access to me. You've got access to exactly how to study, how to take the test, and how to be confident. And then also just like little hacks along the way of how you remember stuff.
Yeah.
So it works.
Yeah.
It really, really works, and it's dirt cheap. If it was everybody, I know it's my product,
Sure.
but if everybody would just do this program, passing rates would be much higher than they are.
Sure. What
Like
else does?
30% people fail.
Yeah. What was it?
So 30% of first-time
30%.
candidates fail the exam. So
Yeah.
one out of 3.
Yeah. That's crazy.
We could crush that, honestly.
Yeah. So what else does jump bag offer? What other kind of let's talk about packages and stuff. So you've got your master class, which is based on the EMT, right? The NREMT.
Yeah, and so whether you're paramedic, advanced, basic, or EMR, the
Mhm.
masterclass works because it's the principles and how you do these things, and then you
Sure.
apply your content, right? So there's that, and the online NRMT test prep is like the same course, only it's live. Then we've got the practice exams for EMR all the way through paramedic that uses
Mhm.
spaced repetition learning, which is really pretty cool because it's like you get something wrong, it keeps it closer in the algorithm. If you get it right, it pushes it further away, but it reintroduces it. And scientifically, there's a certain time frame when you lose the information. With spaced repetition learning, once you get it right, it pushes it off to just before that, and then it reintroduces it so you can maintain it. So it takes you from short-term memory to long-term memory faster.
Gotcha.
So it's really pretty awesome. And then I've also got a refresher course. So it's through the state of Alabama. Certain states will accept out-of-state CEs because it's got a CE number from Alabama, but National Registry accepts it from any state. So if somebody's failed 3 times, they need a refresher course to unlock that 4th exam. They can do the refresher course, and I'm teaching it, and so you will be ready for your next exam.
Gotcha. So it counts towards your CE hours
30
because
hours.
it's NREMT.
Yes. And now
Cool.
the thing that I'm really, really excited about, probably, I linked up with this guy, Ray Ashcraft from Ashcraft EMS. And so he's out in Sacramento, and I had my eye on him early on through Instagram because I'm like, this guy's stuff is really cool. He's got like his own academy where people come and they basically get coached and mentored through the process, and they run scenario after scenario after scenario, and he teaches them how to learn and how to be field ready while they're going through EMT school. And it's really, really good. And he's like dissecting pig lungs and hearts, like in class, and
Yep.
intubating lungs. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
So I had my eye on him. Well, he messaged me the one day and was like, hey, I like this or whatever. And then I messaged him, and then we just started messaging back and forth. And we see things very, very similar. And so we're coming together. We're going to collaborate, and we're creating this new website called passemtclass.com. And
Okay.
we're going to be launching it in the summer. We've got an estimated date, but EMS education has needed a facelift for a long time. This is going to turn it on its head. I'm super excited. This is going to be a game changer for people, because you can't always pick your EMT school or your instructors because of where you live.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, you're going to be able to pick your education. Like,
yeah. No, that's awesome.
You're going to be ready. It's going to be fun. It's going to be simple, and it's going to be equipping. And Ray is really, really talented. I I do well on the instruction method. We really sync up well. It's going to be a game changer. So passemtclass.com. If people go to that now, they can basically get links to Jump Bag EMT, and they can get links to Ashcraft EMS for the different resources. And so they're going to be able to access me. They're going to be able to access him. And then here in the summer, they're going to be able to access us. And
Cool.
it's going to be a game changer, man. It's going to be.
And drop that again. What was it?
PassEMTschool.com.
PassEMTschool.com. Cool.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Like, it's already good, and we haven't even launched it yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Jump Bag a little bit. What else is Jump Bag really like? I really want to talk about these 30-hour refreshers again. So your 30-hour refreshers are for paramedics specifically, or do you have them for different levels?
So I like to do the 30-hour refresher at the paramedic level because it needs 30 out of 40 hours for the EMT basic. Also, it's important to have an idea of where this thing's going. You know, the continuum of care. It's not just about what I do. It's about what I'm doing to get them ready for the next thing. So you may not have to start an IV, but at least you have a general awareness. That's good. It provides a little more context. Plus, when you're thinking here, or you're learning here, I should say, I'm trying to do the camera thing, but your skill levels here, it's just that much easier to understand your portion, because all of a sudden there's a context that, hey, there's stuff way beyond that. This is easier than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then also I take the curriculum. This is curriculum-based refresher course. So it's like if you went through EMT school or advanced school, this is curriculum-based. This is reteaching it in the way that I speak, that's outside of the education model. I don't have to say it the way they want me to. I can say it the way I want to, so that it's easier to understand.
Exactly.
So if you're getting ready to take registry, but you're like, hey, I've been on it for a while, or I'm intimidated, just taking this refresher course is a huge boost of confidence and information. It will give you what you need. And if you just need a refresher course, it works pretty well too. I just sold like a group of 10 to a local agency, and they ran their people through it, and they were like, hey, we really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Which was cool.
Another thing that would be really helpful for is, I've known somebody recently that went back and got he's a paramedic, and he went back and got his instructor certs to be able to start teaching EMT. In order to teach EMT, you have to go retake your NREMT test. So he spent a couple of weeks, prepping, trying to get ready to retake an EMT test, but he hasn't done, not that he hasn't done, but he hasn't had to study basic EMT skills in, 15 years, because he's been a paramedic, So like, that's another good situation for it. Everybody that's going back to take it again.
I'm really proud of it, and I'm really excited about the next one, because this was my first time at it. So there was just a whole learning curve with it. But the things that I liked about it was they're 45-minute blocks. So the lesson's about 45 minutes. And so they're broken up into 4 days. And so you do 45-minute lessons, and they're self-paced. So pause them, start them, whenever, but it keeps track of your progress. At the end of every day, there's a multiple choice test where the information is pulled from the content that we covered. And so at the end of the 4 days, you've taken some quizzes, you've done some reviewing. It's been in manageable chunks. So it's not like you got to sit there for 10 hours. No, if you want to do 45 minutes, if you want to do it for an hour and a half, whatever works for your schedule, so that it's digestible.
Yeah.
So, and then I try not to make it so dry. I tell some dumb jokes, some silly illustrations. It's pretty casual. It's kind of like this, and so it makes it for a pretty easy education model, and then it's self-paced.
Yeah.
So I like it.
I've watched a lot of your Instagram videos.
Thank you.
If not all of them. And I love the way that you break things down. So I could see it being a really good program. Obviously, I haven't been inside the program yet. I haven't seen it, for myself. But after watching probably hours of your videos, I mean, the way you break things down is really, really good. And for anybody watching, go check out, Jump Bag EMT, because they've got especially on Instagram, there's a lot of resources.
It's
So,
growing. It's
yeah,
hard to teach in 60 to 90-second blocks.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Well,
harder
you
than I
figured it out. I'm not even gonna lie about it. You figured it out. It's a good place to go to refresh on things too. I'll go watch your videos when they come out and go, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. I try to say things dumb or make it understandable. If you understand the concept, all of a sudden the rest of the information is that much more palatable.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that because it is a lot of work. My poor wife,
Yeah.
she does
Yeah.
all the recording, and all the graphics and things that come up.
Yep.
I feel so bad for her having to deal with me.
One of the things I haven't gotten really good at yet is video editing. That's why I decided to do a live thing instead of having to record things. Decided to go live so that I don't have to edit it.
That's a pretty good move. You know what? That's just knowing your strength, right? We were talking about that earlier.
Yep. Yep. I tell
Utilizing your
people
resources.
exactly. I tell people generally before, like, we don't cuss, we don't drink, we don't do things like that on this podcast because eventually it'll be monetized, right?
Yeah.
And and I don't feel like editing it.
Yeah. Get
So,
it, man. Well, I hope you get monetized quick.
I'm not super stressing it. My biggest thing is just getting people in here, getting stories out, getting education out and information. And it's a need I feel, and like whether I'm getting paid or not, I don't care. As long as I'm doing it, I've got sponsors that pay the way for my for the software that I need,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all I need. I don't need anything else. I just want to do it for fun. So
Well, it is fun. I never thought I'd be on a podcast.
yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd have a podcast.
I know.
It's been cool.
Well, I like
Sweet.
it. I'm going to keep plugging. I've sent your thing to a couple different people. And then I know I advertised it, and it's not like there's a ton of people. We got like 2,500 people on Instagram now.
Yeah.
But it's picking up pace. Like more and more people are getting it. And it's funny what catches.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it is.
I did which one was it? It was it might've been a CHF one. My wife kept saying, do a whiteboard. And I'm like, and I've been putting all this work into writing these outlines and trying to come up with illustrations and a lot of the stuff I say anyways, but packaging it so that it's accurate and and it's in 60 to 90 seconds. Right. But she's like, oh, just do a whiteboard. So I was just like spiteful. And I'm like, here's this, and this. And then it was like 7,000 views.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm so sick of her being right all the time. It's unbelievable. If I would just shut up and color, I think our life would be a lot better. This is blasted pride.
Dude, we're gonna have to put that on a T-shirt or something. That's gonna have to be a thing.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. Shut up and color.
The Marine Corps was shut up in color, but don't eat the crayons.
Don't eat the crayons. That's the thing. You gotta give them markers. That's the one I crayons left. That's cool. Well, cool. Anything else you want to cover? Anything else you want to talk about?
I wanted to plug for you guys if you're a jump bagger. Check out the podcast. They're getting some good information out there and getting some fun guests on there. And I didn't appreciate the volunteer side of things as much as I do now, because I mean they're the folks that are going to show up to my house when my kids are sick. And I just never really thought of it like that. I was just like, oh, firefighters and professional. We're all just dudes wearing T-shirts, driving trucks, right? And so we're going to show up and help. We're going to get invited into their worst day and do something. So I really appreciate you bringing up the volunteer side, because I'm learning to appreciate it more. I'm getting a newfound respect for just the simple how to, just the ability to get things done. We highly, highly underestimate that. We need another piece of equipment or another tool. What about just the guy who just knows how to get stuff done?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of these volunteer departments are. And they train. So it's cool. So shameless plug for you guys, because I've been learning. I've appreciated it. And then Ashcraft, check out Ashcraft, and then passemtschool.com. That's going to be coming. And if you need help with entering EMT, I mean, there's always the outliers, but if you just want to pass 20, 30, $40, you can have practice exams and you can be told exactly how to do it and access to me. And
yeah, I like it.
But adult hard, do your thing,
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. That's awesome. Well, I love what you're doing. I love how this is going. I'm excited to see what we got. What we got
Thanks,
coming
brother.
up. I'm really excited to see this past EMT that you got coming up in the summertime.
Yeah,
Really excited
I don't want to
about it.
give too many details away,
Yeah, sure.
but I mean, I'm telling you, it's so exciting. We talk, we like giggle, me and Ray, and so he does Ashcraft EMS, and I do jump bag. So we're like, oh, what should we call her? Whatever. I'm like, ash bag, right?
Hashtag.
We're like, we can't be ash bag.
Yeah.
That's maybe a T-shirt one day, but nah, that's not it. So we had to come up with a different name. But
That's funny.
but we just have fun, and the dude's brilliant, and he's talented,
Yeah.
and it's going to turn it on its head. People,
Yeah.
it's going to be different.
Well, I like what you're doing. What you're doing is good.
Thank you.
Well, hey, it's been
Well,
great. It's been great having you on. I'm gonna throw up Jump Bag's website. Check out if you're watching this. Go check out the jumpbagemt.com. Go look at all their package deals. Go look at their masterclass. Get the information that you need to pass your NREMT before you go fail it 5 times, 6 times, however many times.
Yeah. I don't even care how many times you've taken it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a different kind of test. It's a different kind of world. It's a different kind of thinking that you have to get your mind into before you can go do it.
Yeah.
So go check out Jump Bag EMT. Go check out their Instagram page. Use Plug Ugly for 20% off of anything. But just go check them out. At least go watch videos.
Yeah.
Because they're really good videos up there too.
Thanks. Freebies,
Well,
you know.
cool. Well, I appreciate you being on, man. I appreciate
I
it.
had fun.
It's been a fun show.
I talk.
Don't go anywhere. Do what?
I talk too much, so I'm gonna
No,
go
you're
home
fine.
and shame spiral. Be like, oh,
You were completely fine, dude. It's been good. Just don't go anywhere yet. We'll pop you off. We're gonna say bye, and then I'll holler at you before we leave.
right on.
All
Thanks,
righty.
fellas.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Well, that was really cool. That was good stuff. Long history, a lot of career, a lot of differences. It's really neat. I'm excited to have people like this on. So cool. Well, everybody, thank you for watching. Anything to add? Gucci?
Good.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And looking forward to the next one. If this is something you'd be interested in being on, something you'd be interested in doing or being a part of, DM me on Instagram, shoot me an email, whatever you got to do. Email address is thepluguglypodcast@gmail.com, or you can go check it out on Instagram at the Plug Ugly Podcast. And really appreciate everybody watching. Thank you.